Preliminarily, now we're being recorded. Now everyone can be on their best behavior.
All right, let's call this meeting to order.
Should I do one of these?
Ready for a roll call?
Yes, please.
Okay. Committee member Baranek,
Here.
committee member Schmidt,
Yes.
committee member Van den Eyck,
Here.
vice chairperson Funk,
Here.
chairperson Newsom,
Here.
all present.
All right, can I get an approval of agenda?
Don't go away yet. So move.
I'll second.
I didn't hear the first, I'm sorry.
I'll first.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
It wasn't.
vice chairperson Funk,
Yes.
committee member Van den Eyck,
Yes.
committee member Baranek,
Yes.
committee member Schmidt,
Yes.
chairperson Newsom,
Yes,
motion passes 5-0.
thank you. All right, this is where I open it up to public comment. That's for anything that is not listed on the agenda today. So if there's anyone that's wanting to speak, please raise your hand or hit star, is it star 9? If you're on the phone.
It looks
Okay.
like we do have a person, Devin. I can allow them to speak.
Okay, Devin?
Yeah, thank you. I just had a quick couple comments. Very first thing is when we call in remotely via Zoom, I believe you guys are starting the meeting before I can even log on. That's the very first thing. And the second comment I had was I was curious to see if there's an update on when the ADU drafts would be available for public release so we can start looking at those. That's all. Thank you.
We try to start on time. Lately, we've had a little bit of technical difficulty, but we're supposed to start every day by 2. And I know this morning, or every meeting at 2. I know today, as we were all logging on, we didn't have access. It hadn't populated at 2. So we can, I guess, allow a little bit of extra time for a few people. I can't even see any of you right now. That's always the challenge, is to figure out who's present, because until they ID turns on the switch, none of us were in it until 2. So trying to make it more easy for people to participate. I think prior to this meeting, there were some postings about having downed links. So I think our staff has been really diligent about fixing that. So let us know if you have any additional comments or need to reach us. You have our emails. You can always send us a comment as well. Annette has already forwarded us some comments prior to this meeting. So thank you. Anybody else have anything for public comment? The nice thing about this meeting is it's a little bit more informal. So it isn't just, most of us dress down and we actually get to meet in public. I think at some point we get to do that again. And I think this technical issues that we tend to have will start to go away, because I think we can go back to being a hybrid, both call in and possibly meeting. So we'll push for that a little more.
There
Looks
is
like-
another hand raised.
Yeah, I will allow Thomas to talk. Thomas, you should be able to speak if you unmute.
Alrighty, can you hear me?
Mhm.
Hey, so I'm just clarifying here. So this is for the building that's happening on the corner of Navajo and Atascadero.
No, this is public comment. The 2 items that are on agenda, we haven't even started yet. So this is for anything unrelated to the 2 project reviews.
Okay. Hold on. So okay, so this is just for public comment. This is not because sorry, I'm just trying to make sense of it all, because I got a notice that they're building the 2-story unit just next to my house, and that this was the meeting that, if you wanted to voice.
You're in the right meeting. Yeah, that item's going to be coming up
Okay.
in just a little
Yeah.
bit here. We're just talking about general items right now, or stuff that's not on the agenda. And then that item will be coming up next. So hang
Okay.
on.
Cool, right on. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So I
And-
guess
and
for
I-
some that are new, you want to tell them how it works, Kelly?
Oh, I can tell them how it works. Sure. So the meeting just started. So I don't think anybody missed anything. It does take about 30 seconds for the room to populate, but I think we've captured everybody. So we call for sort of general comments about anything random that you want to bring up that's not on the agenda. And then we'll go into presentations for each of the agenda items. And then you will have a chance to speak as the public after those items are done being presented. So just hold on and we'll definitely get to you. I also wanted just to touch, I think Devin had a question about the ADU stock plans. And we just finished a meeting with our consultants. They're working on construction documents for all of our building officials to review. We are hoping to get from them sort of like a sneak preview of elevations and floor plans so that people can see if they're going to be useful on their properties and start planning. So that hopefully will be up on our website soon, and hopefully we'll do a little bit of social media outreach when we have that available. But do keep calling and checking in because we're very close to having at least some preliminary plans available for review.
Thank you, Kelly. All right, anybody else? Do we have any callers, Luke?
There are some people on the phone and they can press, is it star 9 to raise their hand? It doesn't look like anybody's, oh, we've got one that has raised their hand. Let me move them over. All right, the caller ending in 0637. You might need to unmute, which I think on the phone, Mariah, correct me if I'm wrong, is star 6.
How quickly we forget. I swear it's just a month ago that we did this and I can't even remember what we push on the phones.
I know. Yeah, so star 6 would hopefully unmute you if you're on the phone. There you go. Looks like you can speak now.
Okay, got me? Awesome. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, and sorry, I'm also kind of with earlier because this is now open for the public comments regarding the ADUs.
Sure.
Yeah, the DRC did review ADUs, and so it's under their purview. And if we can answer any questions, we'd be happy to.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was trying to log on, so the phone is definitely new for me. So sorry if I'm a little more flustered. I'm also holding a baby, so excuse that. I was just wanted to raise some concerns also regarding that ADU unit going in on the Atascadero Avenue. And I just didn't know, so now's the time that I can express those.
Yeah, we'll actually get to that multifamily development item in just a few minutes. The previous caller had questions about our, yeah, that's okay, pre-approved ADU stock plans that the city is working on.
Okay, then I will hold off. Sorry about that.
Okay, we'll hear from you shortly.
Okay, thanks.
It doesn't look like we have anybody wanting to comment in the general section at this time.
Want us to answer any of the questions that were asked about the ADU stock plans that are coming forward? I think.
If you want to, that's fine. I mean, I think a lot of people are here and trying to understand ADUs anyways, so it'd probably be a good
There's 2 things.
concept.
There's our stock plans, which the DRC reviewed recently. I believe our first caller was asking about that, when they'll be able to review drafts. And we'll have drafts of those in September. And we're still moving towards doing that and have everything going by the end of the year. So those will be available here soon in a few months. As they go through the plan check process, but people will be able to see drafts possibly as soon as September. But there's a whole nother piece everyone should be aware of as well, and that's the ADU policies, our ADU ordinance that we'll be adopting for ADUs, and actually one for urban dwelling units, which is under SB 9. That is actually going to the Planning Commission this coming Tuesday, August the 2nd. And drafts of those policies will actually be available on our website starting tomorrow. So people can take a look at the draft policies that pertain to those as well. So 2 big topics on ADUs that are happening that are really going to help achieve the state's goals.
Thank you. We have a lot going on these days. Alrighty, so I will close public comment for non-items on the agenda. We'll move on to consent calendar. Can I get an approval of our draft minutes?
I'll make the first motion, please.
I'll second that.
Committee Member Schmidt,
Yes.
Committee Member Vanden Eyck,
Yes.
Committee Member Baranek,
Yes.
Vice Chairperson Funk,
Yes.
Chairperson Newsom.
Yes,
Motion passes 5-0.
thank you. Okay, now on to the topic of discussion.
Let me share screen real quick. Can you see the presentation still, or did it disappear?
We can see it.
Perfect. Okay, so the first item that the DRC is reviewing today is a new multifamily infill development project on Atascadero Avenue. It's actually on the corner of Atascadero Avenue in Navajoa. So this is an aerial view of the site. The site is currently developed with a single family residence. It is zoned multifamily with a maximum development potential of 24 units per acre. This site is a little less than half an acre. So their minimum base density is 9 units and their maximum density, base density would be 11 units. This is just a site photo of the existing single family house there facing Atascadero Avenue. A little bit of context, there's an existing single story multifamily development adjacent to them on that side. And then this is sort of the existing oak tree that exists that you can see on the plans in the single family house along Navajoa. And then the property adjacent on Navajoa is an existing single family residence that has not converted to multifamily as of yet. So the project does include the construction of a new 2-story 8-unit multifamily development behind the existing single family residence. There are 6 units that are 720 square feet and 2 units that are 625 square feet. They are providing 12 on-site parking spaces for the development, and they do have 1 deed restricted low income affordable unit, which does qualify them for state density bonus provisions. So the zoning allows for a maximum density of 11 units. They are proposing a 9 total with the existing single family residence. Per that state density bonus law, they are entitled to 1 concession and any waivers necessary to allow the development to move forward in a reasonable fashion. So they are not requesting any bonus units to be constructed at this time, but they do have a setback concession that they're requesting, and they did meet the state density bonus parking requirements. So this is the proposed site plan here. So we can see the existing single family residence in this location here. It's a unique shaped site. This angle is not quite a 90-degree angle like we see at normal corners. And so it kind of creates this triangular shaped parcel, but it does have 2 frontages. So the Atascadero Avenue frontage would be considered their front frontage. And then this Navajoa Avenue would be one of their side frontages. The new 2-story building is placed back here towards the rear of the site to allow the parking lot to be accessed off of Navajoa Avenue. It does create for some interesting shaped areas here and here that will be used as landscaped common areas. And there is a gas company easement that exists here that we don't believe is in use for any facilities, but would allow for some landscaping, but would not allow for any buildings to cover that area. As part of our conditions that we're requesting, we are requesting that they eliminate 2 parking spaces that are directly adjacent to where the sidewalk will be constructed along Navajoa, just to avoid that conflict between cars and pedestrians and to create a little bit more of a landscape buffer as required by our code. With those 2 parking space reductions, they will still meet the state density bonus parking ratios prescribed by the state law. We've also conditioned that they pull these parking spaces back to allow for a landscaped overhang for the cars, which would allow them to meet the code requirements for 5 feet of landscaping along this area between parking and the property line. Of course, we cannot do that with the accessible space. And so the accessible space will still be at a 3-foot setback to this property line. They are also requesting, depending on which property line is considered the rear. It's an odd shaped parcel, so we would normally consider the Atascadero Avenue front, the front setback, and then this setback would then be the rear setback, this being the corner side and this being another side. They are setting the building back 5 feet off of this property line, which complies with our code, but it's also has a pinch point of 5 feet here, which is not compliant with our current code that requires a 10-foot rear setback. So that is being requested as their state density bonus concession. There's also an existing oak tree that I mentioned before from the pictures that's on the corner of Navajoa. That oak tree is within the right of way and may need to be removed to allow those sidewalk or on-street parking improvements to happen. We are working with our public works team to see if that can be retained, but we're not certain at this time.
Pardon, just a second, Kelly, when you make references to this, I'm not able to see any visual reference on the screen to what this
Can you see this
is.
side?
Yeah, now I can see the
Yeah, okay.
cursor moving.
All right, you're
I
on
was
my,
not-
you're
I
on
was
my
in-
other screen. I apologize. I have two
okay.
versions of the presentation up and I thought you could see the other one. Okay,
Thank you.
I'll go through it quickly. Front setback here, rear setback here, side setback, corner side. Recommending removal of those parking spaces, common area in these locations, gas company easement. This would be the area that would not comply with our code for setbacks, as would this area be here. Is there anything else that you were missing? Or are we good? Okay. We can come back and revisit anything we need to. So in terms of our multifamily standards for our code, we do require a minimum amount of storage to be included in each unit. These are 1-bedroom units with an office space, and so they are providing some laundry facilities on site in separate rooms, one on the top floor, one on the bottom floor, and they do have some linen closets and some storage in the office areas. They're providing a little less than 3,000 square feet of recreation space. That actually doesn't include the front yard area of the existing residence, so that would add to the recreation space that's available on site, and it does meet our minimum code standards. And we do have a 50% maximum lot coverage, and the project will meet that 50% once those 2 parking spaces are removed. So as mentioned, the applicant is requesting a concession from our setback standards from 10 feet to 5 feet. That's at that pinch point of the building. And then for that accessible space for landscape area, because we cannot reduce the size of that space per state law. And those are the 2 concessions and waivers requested. A little bit about the unit design. This is sort of the first floor plan, but it's also reflective of the second floor plan. So you can see that there are 1-bedroom units with offices. They range from 625 square feet to 720 square feet. We did add a condition that the sort of those closet spaces, or what could be considered closets, be removed from the office so that that does not become a bedroom easily. In terms of architectural design, the new building proposes a stucco base on the first floor and some horizontal siding on the second floor. They do have gable roof features, not only at the ends of the roof, but also along that front elevation to provide some variety. The stairs and the entryways into the units on the second floor include wood railing, and they do have gridded sliding windows. In terms of staff's recommendations, we did have a couple topics of discussion included in the staff report. We wanted to make sure that the facade materials wrapped all elevations. We do a lot of four-sided architecture in Atascadero, knowing that our properties are larger and there is overlook from all sides onto most buildings. We also wanted, in that vein, the windows to match on all elevations, including the grids. The DRC might also discuss different window styles that might be a little bit more traditional colony styles, such as sort of a paired hung style windows or something of that nature to improve and break up the elevations. We also conditioned that the building include darker earth tone colors to make sure that it is not, a stark white or bright color. And that the stucco be a sand finish or a hand troweled so that we get away from that very textured lace stucco that can get a lot dirtier and dingier looking. We also are recommending that the DRC consider adding roof elements to the rear elevation, the same way that they were to the front, to kind of break up the linear nature of that elevation. The DRC can also look at some other options for materials, including maybe using vertical siding elements instead of the breakup of materials between the lower and the upper floors. It is a very horizontal building in nature. So you might consider board and batten siding with decorative gable end materials to create some more verticality to the building. In terms of trash, which is our new favorite subject, we do have a trash enclosure provided on site at the end of the parking areas that's accessible from the trash company and will be sized appropriately through their building permit review for not only trash and recycling, but for new requirements for organic waste as well. So the applicants have not submitted a landscape plan to date. They wanted to make sure that the site plan was sort of approved with all of DRC's modifications. So we have added a couple conditions for landscaping: street trees along the street frontages, shade trees adjacent to the parking lot and within the open space areas, and some narrow shrubs along the southern property line where that 5-foot setback is along the back of the building that would grow beyond the top of the fence to provide some layering and some aesthetic breakup. So DRC discussion items for today include overall site design, the architectural design, including staff's recommended changes in the staff report, which would include materials, colors, anything of that nature, and any additional landscape comments the DRC would like to make. And that does conclude staff's presentation. We're available for questions, and I know that the applicant's representative is also an attendee and can answer any questions for you.
Thank you, Kelly. All right, we'll open it up to questions from DRC committee. Dennis.
Thank you. First question has to do with the oak tree at the corner of, And is the oak tree within the gutter line, or is it outside of the gutter line? Do we know?
My mute button disappears when I'm in presentation mode. We don't know. They're not that far along, maybe in detailed construction documents. The applicant's representative might be able to answer that question if they have some more detailed drawings.
Well, hopefully it'll be outside the gutter line, and then maybe we can work the sidewalk around it and retain it, or put something there to retain it. I'll note though, over on El Camino Real, over by Food for Less, we do have some bump outs in that area for oak trees that go into the travel lane. So whether that would be feasible here and whether Public Works would accept that, we'll find out. You had mentioned roof elements along the back side of the building. Are there other options besides roof elements to break up that line? Could we put coverings over the windows or anything like that? I mean, that is kind of a west side facing or sun side facing side of the building. And so I'm sure at some point during the daytime, there'll be a lot of sun hitting that side of that building. And whether the windows could be covered in some way or help to be covered might be better. And also provide some articulation on that particular side versus putting the gable ends that had been noted. On the trash enclosures, do we require them to be covered?
Our code does not currently have a covering requirement. We do require them to be in an enclosure and screened, but we don't have a roofing requirement in our code today.
Per stormwater management, that's not something that is required per storm management?
I don't implement those standards, but I have not seen that listed as a requirement on other projects, although I have seen a lot of projects add a cover just for safety and security.
Well, mostly I have seen it for if it rains, not to let water get into the trash enclosure, and then move trash out of it or get into the trash and then percolate materials out of the trash. And so that's where I've seen it used. I want to note that there were several emails that were posted online. One of them had to do with what the chairperson was speaking about at the very beginning in terms of being able to find material online, but specifically that person was talking about this particular project. And so that's kind of tied into this in that way. There was a letter from the neighboring family, the gentleman who had called earlier during the very beginning, his family. In that letter, there was discussion about ministerial and discretionary actions. And they suggested that today's meeting was a discretionary action per sequa. Is that true?
No, so this, a building permit of less than 12 units currently as it stands in our code is a ministerial action. So DRC is an advisory body to staff on architecture and design, but it is not a discretionary review body in this instance.
And so if there is a discretionary action, now does this go to the planning commission?
It does not. It's just a
Okay.
ministerial building permit.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Sorry, I have it muted, so you don't hear background noise. Other DRC questions, and I only see half of you, so hold on. Oh, there's Susan.
Yeah, thank you. Following up on Commissioner Schmidt's question here, so if this is a ministerial process and the DRC here is advising staff with regard to architectural design considerations. If persons in the community were unhappy with the advice that this group gave to staff, or with staff, the idea that staff might approve this, is there an appeal avenue for a ministerial action?
That's an interesting question. We haven't been faced with that. I would like to say that any action by the DRC is appealable to the Planning Commission, but on a non-discretionary project, this hasn't come up. So I'd like to seek legal counsel on that before I give you a definitive answer on that situation. Typically what we would do, well, first of all, if we can't come to agreement with the DRC, we can continue this item. But if we wanted to tell the public that your decision is appealable, let me follow up on that during our meeting right now, and I'll give you an answer momentarily.
That'd be great. I just wanted to clarify what the process is and the extent to which we as DRC have discretion or do not.
And that's an important distinction, exactly. And primarily what it comes down to, you do have design discretion on this, but you don't have discretion to approve or deny the project. And in terms of the design of the project, state law is going to prevent us from doing things that make the project unachievable or add substantial costs to the project. So that's real, or reduce the density of the project. So those are some things we have to keep an eye out for. But beyond that, you've got ultimate flexibility on design guidance through this process. So we still have a design review process. We still have standards which to uphold. We still have property development standards. Obviously, you've noted they've asked for concessions from some of those, but we still have to uphold parking and all of these other things and carefully analyze all of those features.
Okay, thank you. And how does the design here compare with the guidance that City Council gave staff recently with regard to objective design standards for multifamily projects that abut current residential projects, or multifamily projects in
Yes.
general?
Well,
There's a lot of interfaces against commercial, against single
Ex-
family, against industrial.
Exactly. Generally, at the City Council, our guidance has been to really be careful with the compatibility between projects that are multifamily and projects that are single family or single story and multi-story. I think the direction that was given was to really focus on that interface with design standards. Now, we didn't get into minutia, we didn't get into details on how that would be done. And in fact, we're working with a consultant to do that now. So we don't have anything concrete yet, but certainly I think in our recent experience with some of our development review projects and some of the repercussions that have happened from them, it's become a heightened concern, especially when you've got multi-story buildings with flat facades, very close to a property line. So we're going to be in our design standards going to be looking at solar access. We're going to be looking at articulation and breaking up the mass of very long buildings. And I think that was one of the topics that we broached is how can we make a longer building articulated to where it has relief, it has setbacks, but still can achieve its goals for density and still can achieve a certain height. And there's definitely a careful balance in there.
And since this is a particular project that has essentially a fairly long flat surface, that is, well, you've got two, of course, two, this is very box oriented. One of which is overlooking directly yards in the single-story multifamily project next door, and the other of which will be visible from the street and other things. Is there an option on the table to break that up in some fashion visually?
So that's going to be something up to the DRC as to guide that discussion. And we would also have to demonstrate that it's not going to eliminate the possibility of a very similar density project being built at a very similar cost.
What the Housing Accountability Act says is that, from the time of implementation of that act forward, cities can only enforce objective design standards. And so that's part of our process of updating those, is having more design standards. Currently, we have height, we have setbacks, and we have property coverage. We have some requirements for storage, for parking, and for on-site laundry, but we don't have a lot of objective design look and feel related standards currently adopted.
But what I will say is this is a very good test case for those points exactly. This is a project I think that we can learn from about what to do or what not to do in terms of objective design standards when we develop those. So it's a tough one. This is a challenging one in terms of its proposed design.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And to what extent, as I recall, could you show us a picture of what that long flat face is, as it looks like from the south overlooking there's no balcony along the south face, right?
Correct. The building code would not allow construction closer to the property line.
Okay, which also means that you don't have people walking out on their balconies and peering down into the yards next door.
Correct.
Which does take care of some of that. And the windows that are on that second story on this south-facing elevation, how high up are they?
The applicant's designer can probably best answer that question. They are bedroom windows, and so they are required to be a certain size for egress.
Okay, but they're also, not floor to ceiling type of windows.
Does not appear so. They're a pretty standard bedroom window size.
Yeah, okay, that's better for everybody's privacy above and below. Okay, that makes sense. Tell me about the sidewalks, or do you have any sidewalk on Navajoa, or is that only on Atascadero Avenue? I know there's not one now, but it's after it.
Yeah, so currently there is a sidewalk on Atascadero Avenue. I believe that the city did that as part of one of our safe routes to school projects. With our existing 40-foot right-of-ways in our multifamily areas, we look at balancing on-street parking needs with sidewalk. And I believe the width that we have of 40 feet allows us to do sidewalk on one side and on-street parking on the other side. I'm not sure which side of the street this is. I believe it is the sidewalk side. And so we would be hoping to include sidewalk around the corner.
Yeah, but along the building along Navajoa.
Here.
Yes, okay, so so you're looking to have sidewalk that would wrap around there. Maybe skirting that big oak tree.
Possibly, yes. If it couldn't, and I don't recall if there's sidewalk existing on either side of Navajoa, then the city engineer might just look at doing some widening pockets to allow some on-street parking.
Okay, and there's no connecting sidewalk that goes to on Navajoa.
Not today.
Right, okay, that's what I thought. Any concerns about the, I know there's as I recall, I just did a quick site visit, and I recall that the driveway that we see here is an existing driveway. It just doesn't go into the property as much. Is that correct?
I believe so. Let me see if I can pull up those pictures. There's a driveway here.
Yeah,
It looks to be approximately in the similar location to where it's proposed.
okay, so any sightline issues that we have are obviously not new.
Yeah, they do meet the standard. We do have a certain setback requirement from the nearest lane to the center line of a driveway on a corner, and they do meet that code requirement.
Okay, thank you. In the interior of the design, is there option for a tree? Again, where it's pretty, without any landscaping, it's pretty harsh in the sense that you've got a lot of parking lot and then a very square building. And the trees, trees have definitely helped break that up a little bit.
Yeah, so we've conditioned that they include sort of some shrubs that will top a fence to allow some layering along here. They also have this easement area that they can landscape. And so we have conditioned that they include some shade, larger shade trees in these areas, not only for shade for the open space, but also to sort of provide that softening of the elevation.
Okay, so the common, we could do it in the common area, just not on the areas around the parking lot?
Oh, we've also asked for parking lot shade trees. And so when these parking spaces go away, if this oak remains, that obviously is a great shade tree. They will have some opportunities for another shade tree here, some potentially smaller shade trees along here when there's additional landscape area, and then throughout these areas here.
Okay, and on that top wedge of the pie, what are we overlooking into? What is the property itself? What's next to?
Yeah, this property is zoned multifamily, but it's currently just developed with a single family residence. And so you can kind of see the corner of the house here. And this is their backyard area.
Okay. So how much setback do you have from the balcony and windows that are facing that side and the property edge?
So here's sort of the balcony that sticks out, and I think the pinch point's at 5 feet, but then it obviously comes back from there. I imagine this is the laundry area on this sort of nub right here. And then this is the office space for the smaller unit. So the bedrooms are really kind of along the back here, and the living spaces along the front.
Okay, so people are not unlikely to be spending time sort of hanging out in that particular spot that would be the most looking over.
In the laundry area, yeah, I would think.
Okay, that'll handle my questions for now. I may come back with more later, but that's what I've got.
Thank you, Susan. Once we're done with DRC questions, then we'll open it up to the applicant to answer some of our questions.
And Chair, if I could just weigh in on the question, I think that Committee Member Funk had about the appeals. It does appear in this scenario, this is an appealable action. Any of these decisions made by DRC are appealable to the Planning Commission. and the DRC may refer matters to the planning commission when they feel that's reasonable. Now, the planning commission's action wouldn't be to deny or approve the project. It would be simply on those design issues. So any appeal item has to be based on the design, again, back to those design parameters and findings of neighborhood compatibility or incompatibility, but not to deny it, but just to change it.
Thank you, Phil. Couple questions then related to DRC scope. How far in advance do we do noticing for the neighborhood?
10 days typically.
10 days. And then what is the radius for noticing?
300 feet on this one, Kelly?
Yeah, 300 feet.
What's the
And then we
difference?
post the site.
What's the difference between 300 and 500?
200.
You,
Sorry.
3/4 of a football field.
I know, I walked right into that one. Let me rephrase that when we're at it.
Thanks.
Don't we usually have a 500 feet noticing?
We do 1,000 feet for our RS zone properties and then 300 for all others.
Okay, and so some of us who don't know our numbers, what does 300 feet equate to? Is it a block, a half a block? Where are we at?
I would have to pull up, I mean, we so don't have like blocks and normal streets in Atascadero, but certainly I could work on pulling up that.
Well, I mean, like
Radius.
the width of this property is about what, about 100 feet or so at its widest point, maybe, right?
The reason why I asked this question is we do have several people that have shown an interest in this project, which we'll allow you to speak shortly.
It's only going to pick up 2 or 3 properties on each side of this property is basically what it's going to come down to.
Okay,
That's
so
kind of, you know,
that's going to be an issue of why did my neighbor get it and I didn't get it?
exactly. And that's how the law is right now in our city. That's how we do that. And so,
Okay.
and we can choose to do a greater notification, but we can't do less.
Sure.
Yeah, anyway, that's it.
So to sum this up, because of its current zoning determined where we were required to do the minimum noticing. We could have gone a larger noticing, but at the point we did the 300 feet notification.
Yeah, we would need council direction to do larger noticing radiuses for projects.
Okay.
And then,
Oh, okay. Hold on. Jeff, do you have anything to add?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Okay, so we got Susan. Now, for those of the public, this is like Hollywood Squares. I have to turn all of you on, and right now I can only see 6 of us at a time. All right, Dennis, did you have another question?
Yes, I did, please.
Okay,
The common areas, I'm presuming are going to be landscaped in some fashion. I'm more concerned about common area 2 than common area 1 of eventually just being let go and it becoming a weed patch and a trash catch. Is there any act in which the city has ability for the city to say, clean that up, or don't let those trees die in this particular area or any area after the building permit's been issued and finalized?
we do always have that ability because multifamily projects have to meet certain standards in our code, and those standards don't go away just because you stopped construction. Normally our enforcement is complaint-based. And so, if we receive complaints about something, we will go out. Obviously, the fire department cares about weeds and nuisances and things like that. The hope would be in planting sort of those shade trees or longer-term trees, that even if that area is not used as often, with a larger shade tree, there does tend to be just a little bit more aesthetic maintenance to it on its own than if we were to include structures or shrubbery or flowers that needed more constant annual maintenance.
Then one last question that deals with the whole discussion about ministerial versus discretionary actions. There are concessions that are being requested. If a concession is not granted, is that still a ministerial act?
The city would have to find that there is a substantial health or safety risk associated with the requested concession in order to deny the concession.
And then that finding that would be made, is that something that could be challenged, I guess, in court?
Yes, and it doesn't even need to be in court. The HCD has open help for developers and property owners to challenge city decisions on housing projects.
So in a sense, there could be some discretion in that area?
If there was a significant life health or safety risk based on one of the concessions. If they were asking for the state density bonus allows you to add an additional 50 feet onto any housing project that you request. In our city, we do not have fire equipment that can go, 80 feet into the air necessarily safely. So that would be a concession that would have a serious health, life, safety risk that we could deny based on that finding.
If we were to deny the concession for the 5-foot setback along the one side of the property, and then the city would make a finding that there is no significant endangerment, could neighbors then say, we disagree with that, and then take that to the HCD and ask that question?
They could contact HCD, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Emily, do you have any questions?
Yeah, a couple of basic ones. Fencing design was discussed in the staff report, but I didn't see anything, probably because we don't have a landscape plan yet, but has location of fencing been discussed and or proposed by the applicant? And if so, does staff know where that is? And if
Yeah,
not,
so that hasn't really been discussed with the applicant. In projects like this with common open space areas, we generally see fencing just along the property lines. Obviously within the front and corner yard setback areas, that does have to be a reduced fencing or no fencing. So the property will be fenced to a certain degree, but we don't anticipate a lot of cross fencing through the open space areas.
okay. Has the applicant stated whether they would be upgrading or updating the existing residence to match?
They have not stated.
And then Phil had mentioned something about the state regulations restricting a city's ability to restrict a project density. And I can't remember the code he referenced specifically, but I'm wondering if that pertains on the state level specifically to housing units, or if to like habitable like bedrooms. Is there a difference in their eyes?
Really just to the units, not to the bedrooms. We don't, in fact, our density in Atascadero, we don't count bedrooms. We do like the larger
Just
bedroom
housing
counts
unit.
because they are what in the highest demand. But it's really about the density of the project, and that's based on just pure number of units. So the state doesn't want us to do things that stymie that full maximum development potential.
Not reducing number of units provided.
Correct.
Potentially we can
Yeah.
talk about the
Yeah.
configuration of the units.
Yeah, and we should carefully look at the units on this thing too. I don't know if we've gone through the parking calcs and looking at those units. I think I just noticed in this project is proposing offices, which aren't really offices. Those are bedrooms. And so I wanted to make sure this is properly parked, unless our policy would be to take out an entire wall if it's not going to be a bedroom. It has to be open to a core room. So we might want to revisit that before we're done looking at this particular project, because those are the things that we can require this to comply with. It needs to comply generally with the parking standards unless they're asking for a concession. Otherwise, we end up with impacts elsewhere in the community.
Sure. Yeah, that's kind of where I was leading with that question is, what are we allowed to make proposed or to propose revisions to without stepping over the line on that restriction? For now, those are all my questions.
Thank you. I have a couple questions of my own. When we were discussing earlier about the health and safety risks, my understanding is that there are youth that are being housed that are from at-risk population in that area. How do you see this project affecting that?
Sure. So per state law, those places are considered a family. And so we don't have additional regulations that we can place on them. And we also can't limit projects around them based on that. So.
Is this housing going to be, I guess we can ask the applicant here shortly. What is their ideal housing? Is it low cost housing? What kind of demographic do we see coming in here?
I believe their intent is to house employees. The applicant is a local business owner. We can't obviously, because of fair housing practices, force anybody to do that, but I believe their intent is to house employees.
Okay, and then has the agency that has the at-risk housing been notified of this project?
Only if they were within 300 feet.
Phil? I just hate to see this project have this much and they're not notified and without disclosing where they are because they're at risk. I want to make sure that that has been looked at because they're an at-risk population and this drastically impacts them. So I want to make sure that that's been evaluated. And Phil, maybe you might have to look into it as we open this up for the applicant.
Yes, I'm not quite sure on that. I will have to look into that. I'm just reminding myself of the Housing Accountability Act as we're talking as well to look at what our parameters might be on this.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think that we might have needed to extend it to 1,000 feet for them to be notified. So I just want to put that on record as we're opening this up, okay? All right, you're welcome. Let's see. Okay, no more questions from the DRC. Now we're going to go ahead and open it up to the applicant for their presentation.
Preston, I will allow you to speak. You should be good.
Hey, can you hear me? Hello.
Hello.
Yes, we can.
Yes,
Okay.
we can hear you. We're all muted ourselves.
Okay, got it.
Sorry.
Okay, so yeah, Kelly basically covered the whole project. So the idea here is to develop a project that's affordable to build. So we estimate this project to cost right around 2 million, which is a pretty hefty number. So with that, we tried to keep the architecture similar to the neighborhood, but add a couple features. So when you guys talked about like articulation and compatibility, we tried to stay as close to the neighborhood as possible. And then I did send you guys over a landscape plan if you had the ability to pull that up just to show everyone. I emailed it over.
I will check. Let me see what I can do with that.
And then as far as employee housing, that's the intent of the applicant is to offer these units at an affordable rate, given the fact of the market. He has multiple employees that have lived in Atascadero for 30 plus years who just can't afford to live here. So with this density bonus and allowing these 8 extra units, he'll be able to house multiple employees at a discounted rate compared to the market standard. And then as far as the state density bonus law, it's my understanding that we are maximizing it to the site. So there's any implications we have with changing the actual design of like the footprint would impact the number of units and also the cost, especially when it comes to the simplicity of the project. And with this project, we've met all the health and safety and egress as required by the state. And then, so here's the landscape plan if you wanted to go over that, Kelly.
Sure, first time opening it, but we do see some shade trees in the parking lot areas. We see some sort of picnic benches back here in this larger open space area when the easement is included, and some benches and sort of usable open space here adjacent to the units. It does look like, Preston, you can correct me if I'm wrong, there might be some fencing proposed for the existing single family residents to have a private yard space.
Correct, yeah, so they would have a private yard space, and then there's fencing on the north side and also the south side of this property. And then the question in regards to common space 2, that would be pretty well protected from the neighboring properties, and then just have some benches and hangout areas back there. And then do you guys have any questions for me regarding the project?
Let me check my Hollywood Squares. They need to make this, oh, there we go. I was gonna say, now I need to make it bigger so I can have 8 squares. I do have a question on the fencing and the layout of this. I'm trying to look at the map and see where it lies, Kelly. Does it back to the open space that, or the property that currently is acting as open space that's not developed as a walkthrough? Oh, on the first aerial proposed development site, do they have any ability to the general public to walk through that property on Morrow Road through their property?
No, that would be fenced off in that corner.
Okay, all right. Sorry. Just trying to figure out what access is, you know, still with your, what do you call it, common area? What
So
was
you
accessible?
have an access off of Atascadero Avenue. So right on the side of the existing residence, there's basically 2 fences where you would walk right there behind.
I see.
And then
Okay,
also obviously through the parking lot, there's a walkway to the front deck area.
okay, and it will be fenced all the way to the corner. Perfect.
Correct, yeah. And then the front will be open where the walkways or the sidewalks shown. And then we're gonna leave that up to the city's discretion about the oak tree, how that wants to be handled.
Yeah, I will point out that the visibility in that area of Atascadero Avenue and Navajo, it doesn't have sidewalks on all sides. And so as the kids are darting about, it's not the most, with the cars on the street, the visibility is basically 0 from the time that people leave Morrow Road to the time that they get to Navajo. They're doing 30 miles an hour. So as we're looking at doing the development on the front of yours, adding more cars, especially with it being a high school corridor, junior high corridor kind of activity. I just want that notated to, you know, hopefully the city can help you with that.
Okay.
Design development, just because practical in the mornings, the congestion's extensive.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, Dennis, you had some questions for the applicant?
Yeah, I just noticed that the trash enclosure on this plan is different than the site plan that we had. I think it's better located on the landscape plan, but is that are you offering to move it to the location that's shown on the landscape plan?
Yeah, there's a few things that we're open to consideration. So this was the landscape architect's like thought was to put it here, which I agree with you. It's a better positioning. So if you guys like that spot, then we can just stick with that. And then I agree with you as far as covering the trash enclosure, just for like if it rains and it percolates down into the ground. So we'd be good to cover it as well.
Thank you.
Susan, your question?
Yeah, I'm looking at this landscape plan, and I can't quite read the legends, so pardon me if I'm asking dumb questions here, but the sort of semicircular space that we see, yes, that one that we're pointing at. What do we got there?
That's just like a DG area. So just a common area where you could people can sit, eat lunch, play cornhole or whatever. It's just for all the units.
Okay, will there be a shared barbecue or some other kind of space? Or are those?
That's a possibility. I had ran that by the owner, but we haven't came to a conclusion on if there would be like common barbecues, because then he'd have to maintain them.
But there would be seating spaces or something that would make that a social area.
Yeah, there'll be some benches out there.
Okay, and is the trash enclosure, since with this location, the openings now are visible from the street, will those have a solid frontage on it, something that looks nice as opposed to
they're usually like
open or
black
industrial?
iron. and they look pretty good. And then the walls we'll do out of masonry, and then we'll match it with the stucco color of the new structure, so it'll all tie in together.
Okay, and are you talking about iron bars that would be see-through or something? that
They
would be-
usually have like a backing behind them so that they're solid, but then they have some, yeah, they would be like iron bars for the frame.
Okay, but
Yeah, you
But
wouldn't be able to see
opaque.
the trash cans.
right.
Yeah,
that's
our
what- that-
code, our code requires solid doors for trash enclosures.
Okay, good enough. Then that's covered. They will not stay visible, which should be fine. And the trash truck will be able to get in there and out quickly without unduly bothering folks. Okay. The landscaping, as you look over in this sort of, as we get to the corner of the wedge in the two open space areas, talk to me about the height of the landscaping that will become whatever screening there is between the visual screening between the second floor units and the backyard of the neighbor.
So the backyard of, if you're talking about the south neighbor, there isn't any
No, I'm talking about the
North.
north.
north neighbor, if you will, or whatever.
So there,
east,
yeah, so that, I
northeast.
mean, it'll be a 6-foot fence. And so that land, there's a couple bigger trees back there that'll grow up. And then the laundry's positioned at that corner. So like we had talked about, you guys talked about earlier, there's not going to be really people hanging out at that corner. So there really
Yeah.
shouldn't be a privacy issue on that north property, which is, I think, is undeveloped right now.
Okay. And I recall in my site visit, seeing quite a substantial solid wooden fence around a good deal of the property. Is that on this property, or is that the neighbor's fence?
I mean, normally, yeah, I'm not sure when that was built, but we would request that we could rebuild this whole fence along here just so it's new during the development, because it looks like the fence is on the opposite property.
Okay, and same with the fence going towards the south?
Correct. Yeah, we would just want to replace both of those fences at the time of construction, because when you're on a 5-foot setback, you're going to have to do dirt work, what's called an over-X, probably at 5 feet. So the fence will need to be taken out anyway.
Okay, and how will that kind of construction easement or whatever affect the properties immediately to the south, which are pretty close to this, as I recall?
It shouldn't really have any effect on anything over their property line, because all construction can come off of Navajoa. So there really shouldn't be any issue, and no construction will be actually on that person's property on the south.
Okay. That does me for now. Thank you.
Okay, let's see. Any other questions of the applicant? Emily?
Yeah, I'm wondering what improvements or updates you're proposing to the existing residents, if any?
There's no proposal for the existing residents yet. I'm trying to talk the owner into matching the style we do. And that's up to your guys' discretion on like the stucco, whether it's horizontal or it's vertical. So that would be my request as the agent for the applicant, is to match it at the time with the colors and also the style, just so it's cohesive.
Okay, yes. Those are all my questions for now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. I think that is all the hands. Now we're going to open it up to public comment. And this is where anybody that's in the webinar can raise their hand. There we are. I am just going to start at the top and go down. Thomas.
Hey there, can you hear me?
I can.
Perfect. So yes, I'm actually the neighbor that you can see basically that whole backyard where I think it's the south side. I'm still trying to figure that
North
out.
side.
North side. Okay, perfect. Yeah. Obviously I, have some just privacy concerns, because I can tell you from, we've been looking at the plans for a while. Just the fact that, you know, the second story neighbors would be able to see pretty much the majority of my backyard, you know, kind of comes to concern where, you know, I got a 4-year-old and a 7, 4, and 2-year-old where, you know, it's not uncommon for my 2-year-old boy to just strip down and run in the backyard, you know what I mean? So it's one of those privacy things that my first question would be, what, if any, plans are there to kind of help with any, you know, just encroachment of privacy, like trees, or I know we were just talking about a fence, you know, size of fence, that kind of thing.
Okay, I think what we're gonna do is, do you want to answer the questions as we go along so we don't forget what they are, Phil? Is that the easiest way? Kelly, one of you?
At your,
We can do that.
at your pleasure. Yeah, we can go
Okay.
through one if we get them, or we can collect them all and go through them all again. But yeah,
Let's answer them in case others have that question and
yeah. If
then
you
we can
bring up
answer.
bring up the site plan, Kelly, and let's go through what
Yeah.
what the landscape plan is between the project and his property.
Thank you.
Yeah, so in this preliminary landscape plan, they do show like a larger valley oak tree here, and then there's like a few crepe myrtles in these locations. Crepe myrtles do a good job because they're typically sort of a shrub that can be pruned up as a tree, and so they kind of get very bushy at that sightline height a little bit. Certainly, you know, the DRC could, you know, request that the applicant include more landscape material that would have some sort of visual screen at that height.
But then again, it does take time for the landscape to grow. There is a fence going there, right? But there is a walkway and an upper balcony that's probably going to look right over the landscape for at least 5 or 6 years. So yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, this project, because of its zoning, is entitled to go up in height, and it is entitled to have walkways and balconies, and it is going to overlook other properties based on the zoning district. So I don't know if there's a way to completely mitigate that, unless everything was completely reoriented a different way and there was a, you know, an interior courtyard or something completely different, but it means a dramatic difference in the design. But given this design, I don't think there's any landscape plan that's going to adequately screen the second floor from the adjacent property.
Right. And that was obviously my concern. You know, if there is any solution to that, awesome, that'd be great. But yeah, that's my immediate concern. The other question I had was the parking lot that goes up against my fence. I know they were talking about redoing the fence, but is there anything in the way of reinforcement in case someone goes through the fence? Obviously, that's a safety concern for us, you know, whether it be posts, brick wall, whatever it is. Is there anything in the plans for that?
Yeah, our code doesn't necessarily have any objective design standards for that. A lot of times parking lots come with a curb at the end of the parking spot, although with our new stormwater requirements, some of those are going away to allow water to drain into landscaped areas. Jeff, you might be able to better answer whether or not there's still curbing and it's just openings and curbs, or they can kind of be designed anyway. I'm looking at our city parking lot and some of them don't have a curb at the end of them, so.
Well, they could have curbs with openings, though. There's no problem with doing curbs with cuts.
Right, yeah, we just don't have that as a code requirement, but.
Or they could just put parking block stops.
But if this is a health and safety issue, it's something we could say that there could be mitigation to prevent a vehicle from driving through the fence. Cut curbs would certainly help, or bollards, one or the other.
Yeah, because
that could be in the purview of the DRC.
Okay, right on. Yeah, because I'm seeing 6 spots that are the only ones I'm concerned about, really. And yeah, something like ballards would obviously be a huge plus. And then what is the plan for the water runoff, just so things aren't running off, you know, just into my yard?
So they haven't done any preliminary sort of stormwater calculations yet. State and local codes require that they can't increase any water flow to any adjacent sites, and they have to sort of maintain historic flows. So during the building permit process, our engineering team will be looking to make sure that they comply with those standards. And so there should be no increased runoff towards your site other than what exists today.
Okay, and then I just had two more. One was, so regarding that high pressure gas line, I know that even if it's abandoned, they will still maintain the easement. I mean, I work for SoCalGas, so that's the only reason I know. Now, are you guys positive that they are not required to stay 10 feet away of either side plus diameter of pipe if they maintain that easement?
The easement is an older easement. So as we know with older easements, the language is not super clear. Typically with the older easements, there's not a setback from the easement requirement. The entirety of the requirement rests within the captured easement area. This seems to be that type of easement.
Okay, perfect. And I had one last question just because it's my own, I'm just learning about all this stuff and you guys are clearly a lot smarter than me when it comes to it. So just a definition, because I was the one who sent in the CEQA and just real quick. So my site, and I just kind of want to know how this all works here. So my site was guideline section 15268, where a project involves an approval that contains elements of both ministerial action and discretionary action. The project will be deemed discretionary and will be subject to the requirements of CEQA. So what in that is not what we're doing here, just so I know?
Sure. So housing projects currently in our code of less than 12 units are a ministerial building permit. So we only apply objective design standards that are listed in our municipal code. And so the DRC acts as the authority to review and ensure that those objective design standards are met.
Awesome. So I guess my only other thing is, yeah, just the two things I said, the privacy and just the safety concern on the parking. So do we just kind of wait? I don't know how this runs. Do we just kind of wait for the next meeting and then they kind of bring it up again and figure it out? Or do I get an answer some other way?
So if the DRC chooses to make an action to, that the project meets the standards with conditions, then this will be sort of the last hearing for this project. But the DRC will discuss after public comment and make recommendations and add conditions to the project potentially. So you should know by the end of the meeting where it stands.
Okay, well, I really appreciate you guys, and that's a lot of good information for me as the neighbor.
Thank you, Thomas. Okay, let me get back to my list. Hold on. Okay, Devin is next.
Good afternoon, and thanks for your time. I just had a couple quick questions. The property to the south, is that residential multifamily zoning as a high density as well as the one to the north?
Yes.
Okay. And then the second thing, what parking requirement are you guys using? Are you using the 1 bedroom, which equals 1.5 parking spaces per unit? Or is there a different formula that you're utilizing?
The state density bonus has parking ratio standards for projects that include affordable units.
Perfect. Okay. That is all my questions. I just know that the size of this lot with the requirements that you guys have, as well as the state, makes it extremely difficult to develop. So I'm in support of this development, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Devin. Okay, we have a caller that ends in 9606. And it's
Hello.
There you are.
Hello. Okay. My name is Anna Plotkin. I'm the owner of the 6875 Atascadero Avenue. Yes.
Anna, do you have a computer turned on in the background that has it's echoing?
Yes, I do. Now I stopped it.
Perfect. Thank you.
My name is, so anyway, I'm the owner of 6875 Atascadero Avenue, the property to the south of the proposed multi. Hello? Hello? Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. So I want to tell you, I must admit that I was really shocked when I received the letter proposing to build an 8-family structure on such a small piece of property, barely 5 feet away from our fence, towering 2 stories high over our property. When I purchased my condo 12 years ago, I saw a nice quiet neighborhood with green trees and blue sky. The structure will drastically change the view, the feel, the very essence of it. The building will stick out like a sore thumb in the middle of 1-story family homes. The proposed building is a possible fire hazard because the upper level is not made of fire-resistant material, and it doesn't meet the requirements of a 10-foot rear setback relative to our property. Well, apparently that you are making a concessions to Mr. Hawkins, who is going to build this. This concession is totally interferes with our view, with everything that we bought this property for. So looking at the plan, there is 10-foot clearance between the existing residence and the new proposed multifamily building. According to the city code, the side clearance can be 4 feet. Therefore, the new proposed multifamily building can be safely moved up to 6 feet west. And that will allow it to be moved away from our property by 5 feet, which will create the 10-foot rear setback that is required by the city code. And there will be an ample space to plant Italian cypress trees for some aesthetic cover-up of this structure, intruding on the view from our property. I also want to bring to your attention that the current design leaves an obscure area, which is called common area number 2, with so-called picnic area. And this is on the east side of the building, which could be used as an invitation to some unwelcome activities, such as smoking or drug use. I find it very objectionable, considering this area is in immediate proximity to our outdoor dining area. So I would like you to address my concern. And here I saw that you were proposing, Ms. Kelly Gleason was proposing to plant, maybe to plant Italian cypress trees. Now I don't see the second plan which had those trees. I just see the cement in there. There is no space for trees if there is 5 feet clearance, back clearance. All the surrounding neighbors that I spoke to feel that the proposed development is oversized and it's not appropriate for this location. We request that the city of Atascadero will reject this proposal as is, or at least deny the builder's request of considering the rear property line as if it were a side property line, and deny the 5-foot waiver being requested by the builder on page 4 of the staff report. We request that the city of Atascadero enforce the 10-foot clearance between our property and the proposed building, and I hope that you are going to address my concerns. I'm listening.
Thank you. Kelly, did you want to speak to her?
Yeah, so there were a couple of things. The applicant's landscape plan that they submitted, they did not have our comments yet and comments from DRC. So any comments that DRC makes about landscaping and adding potential shrubs and landscaping, they'll have to update their landscape plan to include that. The south property line could be considered the side property line. The north property line is the one that would be considered by our code to be the rear property line. If that pinch point of 5 feet on the rear property line, I don't know that the building could be moved. The side of the proposed building does not have any openings, it appears, although the existing single family residence may have openings, and the building code does require a certain that 10-foot separation when there are openings in buildings. And so we might not be able to get closer to the existing single family residence than what's proposed as part of the site plan because of those building code requirements where there are openings. The open space areas, they are accessible by the residents. They will be fully enclosed and fenced. We don't have any evidence that the property has any code enforcement issues related to drug activity or unsafe storage of materials or abandoned vehicles or those sorts of things. Were there any other questions you heard, Heather, that you want me to address?
No, I just did want to point out sometimes when we get to the DRC meeting, the applicant can have something different than all of us have in our agenda packets. And in this case, one of them was the landscaping layout. So a lot of times we too are getting presented with new information. So we are trying to process the same thing that you're seeing and make recommendations so that everybody is, best interest is being looked at. So thank you for your time and your comment. Hold on, Dennis. Hold on a second. Okay, go ahead.
Was there a reference to, is the rear yard, is that a concession item? The last public speaker talked about concessions.
Yeah, so if we
the south
consider,
side.
yeah, if we can, again, it's a really bizarrely shaped property. If we consider that sort of more northern property line, the rear, at that pinch point with the proposed building, that would be at 5 feet from that property line. And so that would be a concession.
No, on the south property line.
The south
Yeah,
property
it's the
line,
south,
if it's considered a side property line, then our current code requirement is 5 feet.
And if it's considered a rear yard, then there would be 10 feet.
Then it would be 10 feet. But looking at the shape of the property and the front setback area for the existing house, there's reasonable argument that is the side property line.
And there was a question about whether or not that could be shifted to create what would be a 10-foot requirement if that were considered the rear of the property.
So they would be losing an additional parking space and then be losing laundry facilities if they were to try and shift the building forward. They would be impacted here, and then they'd obviously have to shave this section off here.
But they would gain 10 feet where the.
I don't know if it would
space
be, I
is.
don't know how many feet they could gain, but obviously they could scoot slightly over.
Well, the building can be deeper next to the Southern California gas easement.
Yeah, I still don't know if that would pick up full laundry facilities for them, but some potential space could be added to the smaller units.
Yeah, and it looks like from this drawing that you've got a balcony going over that now is just touches the edge of the parking. So if the building shifted a little bit, that it would.
To meet accessibility on the lower floor walkway to the units, that parking space would likely need to be eliminated. Because there are entrances at the ground floor level here too.
Okay. And would it, is it a possibility on eliminating the parking space that we see being eliminated up next to the north side property? Is that something that could be, I guess, that's to the accessible space. For the others that are being eliminated, could one or both of them be used as bicycle or motorcycle parking? If the applicant so chose.
Yes, that doesn't necessarily meet, I don't think, the state's parking requirement, so they'd still need to meet a minimum number of parking spaces for vehicles.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to ask if we have any more people that want to speak on this agenda item, and then I will open it up to DRC discussion. There we go. It looks like 2 of my speakers have already spoke. Let's let Trista go, and then we'll come back and allow a couple more questions from our existing speakers. Hello.
Hey,
Sorry, I am kind of just gonna be saying almost the same thing, but I just want to make sure my voice is also heard regarding the issue. I'm also in that, the South, I believe is what we're talking about, the condos. As Thomas mentioned, I'm also very concerned with the privacy issue, as we don't even have, as the current things, we don't have any shrubbery that's gonna be eventually big enough to hide anything. And someone, the second floor looking down into our garage, into our backyard for our kids, I just don't love that. Obviously, kind of, as I was saying, we bought this because we did like the open feel and the family feel to it. And I don't know what the possibility, it sounds like all of this is really honestly locked and loaded. So it's just kind of like, we're gonna have to accept whatever happens. But I mean, if it's a 1-story even, that would be at least trying to fit in a little bit more of what, you know, our area is like. I know across the street are 2-story, but this whole little area here is 1 level. And so that's kind of my biggest concern really, was the privacy issue. And also just with the new fence that they've been putting in there, half of it right now is shrub and then it goes down to fence. And I'm just assuming it's all now just gonna be just fence and people walking through that. I don't really love per se. But so I just wanted to also just voice my concern of like, yeah, more people, there's gonna be more traffic. This, I mean, we do know this is for kids coming and going for the school. It gets very congested. And so I just wanted to, again, everything has been said. But it is kind of frustrating to feel like we don't really have a say that this is happening and that we're just kind of having to accept that. And this kind of sucks for our families around here, so.
Thank you for your comment.
I'm just unhappy, but obviously nothing legal that we can change about anything really. So it just kind of, it's a frustrating situation. So, but that's all I have really to say.
Well, we appreciate your time in speaking at DRC tonight. Thank you. Next speaker, it looks like I had one with, there we go. Madeline.
Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hi. Thanks so much, you guys. I really appreciate the thorough just answers to everything. And yeah, so I am married to Thomas. So I'm on the, I guess, the north side over there, that residence. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess like the previous neighbor just said, it seems like everything's kind of locked and loaded here. Yeah, you know, obviously I just have major privacy concerns. You know, my kids basically live in this backyard, and it's, you know, that's like been that was like the selling point for us on this house, was our backyard was kind of like this really nice, safe place for my kids. And, you know, if you're standing in our backyard and you're going to, you know, see where this, you know, building's going to be constructed, it will, you know, look directly in our backyard. And yeah, I would, you know, our fence is, you know, is on its last, you know, tail. And so I, you know, I'm just wondering if there would be, like, if they'd be willing to build like a privacy curtain or something. And I also don't know if it was addressed, if the parking lot is going to be completely open or if there will be a gate. I just have some privacy concerns as far as like, we have some transients in the neighborhood and they tend to they'll go anywhere that's open and that's not closed off. So I don't know if there will be a gate there. And yeah, just where the parking lot is on our side of the fence too. Yeah, I'm just kind of concerned about maybe someone backing up and just, you know, or someone starting their engine and just like the possibility of like a fire hazard. So yeah, I mean, you know, I know you guys are just doing your job, but yeah, it is, I mean, it is like an emotional thing for me just because I do feel like it's just going to be a pretty big safety issue for me and my children. And I don't really know what kind of residents are going to be living in these units. I don't know if there's, you know, I mean, I have no ability to know, but if they're going to be, getting background checks or anything like that. So yeah, I mean, I can't really use the vocabulary you guys have and everything, but yeah, it's just totally an invasion of our privacy. And yeah, if there's anything, any kind of compensation we can have as far as like maybe like a privacy curtain or just something that will just preserve our safety a little bit more. Yeah, so thanks you guys. That's all I had to say.
Thanks for your time this afternoon. All right, so let me look at my list of hands. Trista, you still have your hand up. Did you want to speak again? Okay. And then Thomas, looks like you have your hand up. Did you have a couple more questions?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just forgot something. I was actually very curious about mentioning that it was for his employees, and at first I was like, okay, maybe family, but after looking at all the, the plans, now I'm kind of like, I am a little more hesitant, like, okay, again, kind of what she was just saying, where obviously you never know who your neighbors are going to be, but like, who is he working for? What kind of employees are going to be there? That makes me a little bit more concerned, I guess, in a sense where it's not like, oh, this is all for family. It seems very much like a business-esque type thing. And that was something that did kind of rub me the wrong way, I guess. Where I'm like, are these gonna be more people who are coming in and out and it's just more of like a rotating door? Or again, I don't know if we can have access to the information. We probably don't, but that was something that I did not exactly care for and was wondering if we even could get more information on that, because yeah, I don't love the rotating door idea. I don't know if these are for people who are here all the time or just kind of, it made it sound like they're here and they have been living in the area and they will be here. But also I'm kind of like, okay, are these not families? I would like to know more background information, again, if possible, but that was the only thing I wanted to mention, so.
Okay, thank you. Okay, caller 9606.
Yes, hi. Hi. I just wanted to address this the parking lot, the parking space. I mean, that you said that it would have to be eliminated. Well, according to the plan, to the staff, to the staff report, I read that there has to be required 11 spaces. As of now, you have, this person who is building it has 12. So eliminating this particular one space wouldn't change anything. Still would be plenty of enough spaces to cover because it's 11 spaces needed.
Okay, thank you. All right, Thomas, are you still got your hand up?
Hi there, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so I just had two more. I've frequented the liquor stores that he has, so I kind of know some of the people or any idea of some of the kind of people that work there, and that's what it is. That's his intent. He has the right to, bring in whoever he wants as a tenant. That's fine. But I did have a couple things. One was, is there anything in the works right now? Oh, that fence that they're going to replace on my end, are they going to actually replace the fence or put another fence right in front?
I can jump in a little bit. I don't know for sure. I saw that Preston maybe had his hand up. That is something they would work out with you. So if the existing fence is all the way on your property, they would not have rights to take that down, but certainly you could work with them on just building one new fence along the property line. But if they can't come to an agreement with you and the fence is entirely on your property line, then they would be building another fence right next to it.
Okay, yeah, my only concern with that was mostly just if they are going to replace the fence, and I guess I'll get with them, just making sure that we coordinate it because we have a dog and kids that will run away. So There was that, and then was there any concern as far as the homeless encampment that is directly on the corner? It is a consistent homeless encampment that's there. You can drive by and see the tents and everything. So I didn't know if that was anything that, you know, you guys look into, or if there's any health or safety concerns for the building.
Is the caller talking about the homeless encampment that is, if you follow Navajo to the towards the 101, that is right on that pathway there?
No, I think he's speaking to the one on Morrow Road and the vacant lot that this backs up to.
Okay.
It rotates in that neighborhood. But that one tends to, when I asked about the fencing was because there tends to be homeless encampment that backs up to that building, the Circle K, and it seems to fill that in. Is that what you're speaking to, Thomas?
Yeah. Just, I mean, obviously, you know, they have Echo and the methadone clinic that brings in a lot of the homeless in this area, but I didn't know if specifically the one that, you know, the one that I deal with, you know, right there behind the property on Morrow Road, behind the what used to be the old library, which is right on that corner.
Kind of where the apex of the angle comes together.
Yeah.
Come again? Sorry, I didn't catch that.
Where the angle point is behind towards Morrow Road from there.
Yes, that's the one.
Kelly,
I think his question was, is the city aware of this, and are we proactive on that? And one of us should answer that.
I'll let take that since I talk with Rochelle about the city manager about homelessness essentially every week as we're working on this. That yes, the city is aware of encampments there and at the other end of Navajo Avenue. The city has been working proactively to try to use the limited available tools to the city. If you clear out an encampment, there's our notice requirements. They can be cleared for health and safety reasons. But there are noticing requirements. The stuff that's found there has to be stored for a period of time. And once it's done, the people can come back the next day, and then the city starts over. So, and right now we have a less tractable group of folks who are in those encampments and who are creating a lot of problems. It's generating a lot of complaints to the city. And the city is very aware of it and doing what it can.
Okay, right on. I guess that was pretty much it as far as, you know, I didn't know if that was anything that was a concern as far as the building. But yep, that's all I got. Thank you, guys.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate everybody who come up to public comment and let us answer your questions, and the applicant was able to address some of them as well. I'm going to bring it back to DRC for discussion and to review the list of criteria with the city staff. Anyone got any questions, or where would we like to start? Susan and Dennis.
Yes. One is coming back to the question of the setback on properties to the south. You know, I'm aware that this meets our minimum requirements and the state's minimum requirements. What, if any, additional space might be needed in order to be able to plant something that would give better screening of this very solid face of that second story? That's going to be real visible from those properties, you know, the cypress trees or something of that sort that would, as opposed to trying to create articulation on the building itself, which is likely to be more costly and more, and get us into more at risk of doing things that the state does not allow us to require. So that if there's an opportunity to make a parking space compact only, or make it for motorcycles or bikes only, and create, a shift. Do you have to go 4 or 5 feet to get enough to, you can have cypress trees?
Yeah, the minimum you're gonna need is gonna be 10 to 15 feet to have any kind of a tree, and that's a minimum, given, potential root interference with the building and all of those things. There's three significant issues here that are very challenging. One is the existing residence, 2 is the shape of the property,
Yeah.
and 3 is the shape of the proposed building. With all those 3 things together, it's gonna be a challenge. I think anything that moves an inch is gonna offset everything else. It's, so that's a challenging one, but these are issues that if it's not all the way there, the DRC can weigh in on those things based on its design. So yeah, it's difficult. This is a challenging one. It really, really is.
Yeah, and it's challenging in particular because the state gives us very little leverage.
They do, unless we've adopted a set of objective design standards that people come in and they see those design standards and they have the expectations before they design and submit a project, so they know what they're doing. We look at those objective standards and the state gives us 30 days to respond to the application to tell them where they do or do not comply with those standards. Other than that, there's some criteria for health and safety and there's some criteria for design. And as you know, we're aggressively trying to move forward to city council to adopt those standards, but it's probably going to be several more months. And this project may become a study in that particular endeavor. But still, and I think Kelly should weigh in too a little bit, there is some design flexibility here. We have to make sure it meets all of the other parameters under the density bonus law. And I think the most substantial one is parking. The parking that's required is really, 1 space for 1 bedroom, 1.5 spaces for projects that have two or 3 bedrooms, and 2.5 spaces for a 4-bedroom. The way this project's designed, it has a 4-bedroom house on it, and it has 8 2-bedroom houses on it. So it's going to have to be redesigned to be 1-bedroom units if they're truly 1-bedroom units. And that may alter the design of the whole space anyway. And I don't think that's been clarified yet, and it's a substantial shift, I think, maybe to what they understand here.
Yeah, that's an important one to understanding what we're doing here, because if you really have units that become 2-bedroom units because the housing market is so tight and people are going to be sharing spaces.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's going to be. So
and you have then unrelated people with so then you've got, if you move to 2 cars per unit, there is not space in this neighborhood to.
Yeah, the state would
do
put that at 14 parking spaces required if the new units proposed were considered 2-bedroom units. So they would be at the required parking spaces with the parking spaces directly adjacent to the sidewalk.
But the parking spaces next to the sidewalk are the ones that we're proposing to be eliminated because they violate.
Right, it would be another concession request that could be requested to meet parking. Staff prefers some landscape buffering between parking stalls and sidewalk. They could also potentially do them in pavers, which they might need to do anyways to meet stormwater, so that if you wanted to leave those spaces there, you might request that they be done in pavers, which would at least soften the appearance of pavement from the sidewalk. So that could be an option as well if we wanted to maintain maximum number of parking spaces on site.
Okay. What I was still looking at, if there are opportunities to create something that softens that very industrial type or very flat face going to the south. We can't reduce the height because the state does not. That's not on the table per state law.
Correct.
And it doesn't sound like we can move it enough to be able to get trees in there, but
I
are
mean-
there other plantings or something else we can do visually to?
Yeah, I mean,
for that?
Italian cypress can be skinny. You know, I think the concern would be if you stick an Italian cypress dead in the middle of that 5-foot setback area. They definitely over time would grow tall enough to screen the building, but also would likely be brushing directly up against the windows on the back side of the building. And I'm not sure our fire department would consider that meeting their egress code standards over time. So.
Okay. Trellising?
I mean, certainly there could be, you know, some like wire or trellis feature above the fence that, and you could put some vines up. You know, vines don't take up much space, and especially if you train them higher, then you don't necessarily have to wait for them to grow the 6-foot fence and then some. You know, you could get them going up onto, you know, some sort of wire or trellis above the fence. That would not likely reach up to the 2nd-story windows, but would have some visual screening and layering and screening for the 1st-floor windows.
Yeah, at least you're looking at disrupting sight lines and you know, creating altering the visual impact of it in a way that could potentially help neighborhood compatibility.
Yeah, and I'm
within
not-
a very limited range of options.
Yeah, and I don't know that we can see from the pictures that we have. I'm not entirely sure, you know, if this, I can look at some more aerials. If this landscaping is on this neighboring property, then that does look like there is a mass of something already existing against this building facade.
Yeah, I don't think it's real tall.
Could you go to the photograph you just showed looking down the driveway?
Yes, and I was going to try and pull up a
Right,
slightly
there's
better one.
that cypress tree right there.
I feel like the landscaping that was a little farther back that we were trying to reference.
Yeah,
on
I
the
mean,
site
but
plan.
there is
Yeah.
a cypress tree right there.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay. But that, you know, that one's not going to help any kind of visual screening for the building that's back behind it
No.
and the residences that are back behind it. Okay. Let me check a couple of other things. Yeah, if we're in terms of the interface with parking and the neighbor to the north, I think ballards or something like that would be a useful addition. It doesn't seem like that would take up add a lot of cost or space and might provide some real protection to a house where kids and house are both pretty close back behind that fence. All the way around, can we ask that it be replaced with solid fencing? There is solid fencing now, I believe, on a lot of that. There's a pretty tall wooden fence. And I would hazard a guess it's a 6-foot fence.
Yes, the intent was to include solid fencing. So if that needs to be clarified, we can add that to the conditions.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to see that switch to a chain link or something of that sort. You know, you
No
want to
chain
have,
link.
yeah, quality residential fencing. And of course, the new it'll be in good shape, which isn't right now. Can we require that the Valley Oak would be a box? The Valley Oaks are, great. It'll be a huge tree and, over time work well. The one in our yard has grown vertically very quickly. So that will grow with children next door and provide some visual screening, but particularly if it starts.
Yeah, I think a
there's a
box
box
tree
right away.
or similar, some of our local nurseries, their 15 gallons are appear healthier than a box tree. And so if you said box or similar, it would give us some discretion if they found a really healthy 15-gallon tree, because sometimes those are less root bound and can actually grow a little faster if we can get a decent size.
Okay. I would be interested in making that and the ballards a requirement. Could we also would the applicant be game to consider, or can we ask that they designate the patio area that is in that little tiny wedge at the back, the sitting area, to designate it as a no smoking area? Is it, or is that actually in fact something where there are restrictions on, or do we have any restrictions on smoking in the common areas of multifamily developments?
Yeah, I don't know what our state and local rules say about that. I know we have public areas, from a super public setting, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure we have the common indoor areas, so that, for instance, you couldn't go smoke in the laundry room.
Yeah, I think the whole state, you can't smoke inside unless it's a single family or, your own house.
Right, but whether there is, for that common, that common area is going to be fenced in 6 foot high on each side in that wedge, and it would be, potentially, if that became a smoking joint, that could be really unpleasant to the neighborhood, and definitely has health effects to neighbors. So that would be, maybe there's something, if the applicant might be game to agree to that, or if that's something that we could require or suggest. I mean, you can't enforce it, but at least you can try to create a culture where that's out of consideration to neighbors, not a smoke dump. That's, unless trellising would be helpful to the neighbors to the south. I don't know if there's anything else we can do. We can't make it smaller. So
just wanted to point out, we kind of got an image of that tree that is on the neighboring development adjacent to that south side.
Okay. So that is some definite visual protection there.
It appears to be. I don't know if it's an evergreen or deciduous. I'm not sure, but.
Sure. And then in some of the email messages that were, and there was concern about the noise and impact of constructing this thing. My understanding is that we're all kind of in a grin and bear it mode. That there's not a lot. I mean, the city has noise restrictions on when construction can occur to try to make it manageable, manage the neighborhood effects. And, we just had a big developer in, and got him to swear, yes, absolutely. We enforce that, and we'll do that. And it would be important to remind the developer and subcontractors here, when they get to that.
We do have time and day restrictions, but there's not a lot we can do about construction in general.
Yeah, it's a, this too shall pass, and is really an unpleasant thing to have to live through. But I don't think we have any discretion about it. What can you remind everybody what the time parameters are for construction?
Phil, do you have our Muni code up? I believe it's weekdays. Is it 7 a.m. to 7 or 9 p.m. and then on Saturday, I think it's a later start. And then I don't believe construction's allowed on Sundays.
That's generally it. Maybe about a half an hour difference either way. I don't have the Muni code up at the moment. I just took that down to look at Google Maps, but that is generally it. So it's normal workday hours is what construction is restricted to, if you think of it that way.
Yeah, well, except that it does go up to 9 p.m.
It does. We don't see a lot of contractors doing that. Honestly, they like to be done by 4. But it does. I will say we're really hot in the summer, and so sometimes contractors in the summer will need to do an early concrete pour, to prevent the slab from curing improperly. So on occasion there are those instances. Sometimes I think that's where the evening hours come in. But we generally see contractors at around, the 7 to 4 range in the city.
Okay.
All right, Susan, are you complete?
I'm done.
Okay. Let's go, Emily. if she's still with us.
Yes, I'm here. I seem to have, everything froze a
There
bit.
you are.
There I am.
Hi.
Okay, beginning with the easy stuff. Facade materials, I'd like to see, as you guys mentioned previously, the second story siding wrap the building. And I'd like to recommend as well that, and I don't know how, yeah, must wrap for consistency. In addition to that, I'd like to add that we would like to see some articulation in material and color. I think it is a large building, and perhaps if they could even split down the middle along one of those party wall lines, change from horizontal siding to vertical board and bat siding on the second story, and then paint those a different color. I don't think that adds much cost, but it would add certainly some architectural interest. I also think that on that back elevation that the, since we're on windows, I think that the laundry rooms need windows for ventilation and natural lighting. And if we were to recommend using like a shower style window that's up high, we wouldn't necessarily be adding any view shed from those windows into the neighbor's property, and it would help improve that elevation a bit as well. I agree with all the other items. I don't know that roof elements can really be added without cost, but I think if we could maybe make some revisions to the materials and try to break that long elevation up, that would be substantial. Phil had mentioned the second bedrooms or the office / second bedrooms. I think that's pretty significant, especially since there's implications for the parking, and we're recommending revisions to the parking. I think that should be a priority for resolution with the applicant, since, like Phil also said, that could have that could initiate some significant design revisions on the client side. On that note, I think that if they were trying to squeeze out some additional space, I'd like to maybe see unit 4 and unit 8 lose that office space and have the laundry room kind of sucked up closer to that unit 4 and unit 8, which would gain them 10 feet in flexible layout space on the site, whilst only losing accessory space that they're claiming as office anyway. Generally, I'd like to see, if at all possible, the building come away from the two side or the side and the rear property line, if at all possible. I understand the concern for privacy. I know that we don't protect views necessarily, but anything that we can do, I think, with landscape screening, perhaps recommendation for additional vertical trees along the northerly property line, I'd be up for. I understand everybody's concerns. I know it's really hard. It's just, like you guys have said, it's a difficult project. It's what's intended for the area, but it's still hard to, hear the neighbors' concern for it. So I get it. But those are my recommendations, both in the look and in, placement on the site, being massaged if at all possible.
Thank you, Emily. Dennis.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with what Em was talking about with respect to and what Phil was talking about with respect to the office spaces. And I would imagine that the project's pretty much well down the road, and construction docks are probably pretty close to being finished at this point. But to me, at this point, we need to know what's going to happen with those spaces, and whether that's going to make a wholesale change in the parking area itself. So I'm not really interested in moving ahead without knowing that information. With that said, though, if there is a realistic, flexible solution for that, as Phil had suggested, which would be opening up the wall, then that might not change things. My parents have always talked to me that life is a two-way street, and I'm concerned about the neighbors, the view sheds that are being discussed, but then again, I'm also concerned about the property owner too. And since there seemed to be a little bit of willingness on at least the neighbor to the north of working maybe on an agreement on the fence, I'm wondering if there is something that could be agreed to that with the landscaping that we've been talking about, if it could be put on the neighbor's yard versus on the applicant's area, as maybe a solution of gaining more room that way. Then the neighbors can take care of those trees and take care of those things the way they would like to have them, and let them grow as big as they want, or plant them wherever they want to provide the screen breaks. I do believe that the building might be able to be moved, or the rear yard concession that we've been discussing. I'd be willing to not remove the 2 parking spaces that are nearest the street on Navajoa as a way of sliding the building forward, and maybe lose that 1 parking space that we've been focusing on, but we'd have those other 2 near the street as an option to allow for the building to move up. So that's kind of where I'm at. I think that we need to know what's going to happen with those office spaces before we can really move on and make a decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Jeff, you're up.
Yeah. Let's see, I agree with all the comments that are being made. I do have a concern regarding the, whether or not these are really considered 1-bedroom units, and whether or not we as the DRC need to see it again, or if the staff can determine whether or not those, by removing the closet or whatever they have to do, is adequate on there.
So to clarify, so if the applicant was to say, I will make them 2-bedroom units and keep the parking as is, meeting state code, is that something that then you would want to see back?
They would ask for a concession on the parking.
The state code, no, parking is not a concession per state law. That is just, they provide a ratio,
They would need 14.5 if they're going to do 8 2-bedrooms and a 4-bedroom house. So
that would require them to keep those 2 extra spaces there that you're proposing to remove.
Right.
Yeah, or you could modify 1 or 2 of the units and maybe cut 1 or 2 parking spaces out, or modify the rest. But to meet the definition of a 1-bedroom unit, that additional office space would be open along one wall to the rest of the unit, or to the other unit, not just a closet taken out, just to clarify. But yeah, they could adjust the parking and meet that. So it doesn't matter for us either way. We don't count bedrooms towards density.
Yeah.
So the more bedrooms, the better, actually, from our standpoint, in terms of providing the housing.
Well, I personally don't have any problem with the issue of those parking spaces being there. I can see the city staff's desire to have them further away from the driveway approach, just for backing up safety issues. But it's not unusual to see parking that close to the road. So I don't have an issue with that per se. So if they propose to do them all as 2-bedroom apartments, then I would suggest that we just let them keep those 2 spaces and meet that requirement. And I do think that there should, they should be doing some kind of landscaping to help screen those properties. But I don't I don't know if I'd want to dictate exactly what that is, but I think there should be a good faith effort on trying to screen between the two properties. Obviously, it can't be done for the second story, but we could screen a little bit more for the first story. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Jeff. All right. So yes, it is a difficult project. It's hard to make sure that we're, addressing all of the neighborhood compatibility issues. It's a big change from what we're used to seeing as single level, single family dwellings. And so it's hard to sit here and go, this is what everybody intended their neighborhood was going to look like. I think that there's still information that's lacking. Phil, were you able to see if the immediate high risk area was notified, or do you even have access to that?
I did not. I was not able to find that. And you're talking about the facility that is right there in the former library.
That facility, and also what's used in an emergency care facility for
the former residence right there. I was not. Let me get that information for you. Actually, right now. I was not able to get that.
Because my concern is I think that with this drastic of a change, we should have notified.
It does appear that it is less than, it actually is only, that residence is only 100 feet away. They would have received notification as long as our notification was done accurately, and I believe it was. So I can tell you that that is within the notification boundary.
Okay, because having that much dense housing, and if we are truly looking at housing for a certain demographic in that area, it does put those children at risk. And so that's the one thing that I do worry about as we build this type of housing in there. I think it's hard because I don't think that, I know we did the minimum noticing. I think that with some of the concerns with the neighborhood, I mean, maybe knowing that should probably step back and do a little bit more noticing. And I say that more is because I want the applicant to be able to have an interaction with its neighbors to realize the best way to approach working with them. I mean, this is a 2-story building in single family development. The only way, I live in that area, I live a block from it, I wasn't notified. The only way I was notified is in a DRC agenda packet. And I think that's how this community is taking this, is a little bit of a shock. I know that's also hard in the aspect that we can't, take out this notice and tell everybody that this is what's going to happen, and that the property owners are within certain guidelines, boundaries, and, state housing regulations are able to do what they want with their properties with, a conditional use or a review by a design review committee. I think that's going to change the demographics of this area. There are multi-units in the area down Atascadero Avenue. I just think that the applicant is still going through some design changes, and my idea would be to notice it additional 1,000 feet and not move it forward, so that we can get a little bit more community interaction, so that we do allow the neighborhood to come out and have their voices heard, so that the applicant does the best project that he can that's going to be successful. I think that we need as much housing as absolutely possible. I mean, our city council is arguing that we don't have enough affordable housing. That's great if this really does truly stay affordable. But again, it's a $2 million project is what the applicant said. We want to make sure that they're not having to make changes, or it doesn't get finished because there's a different change or recommendation, and that we really do the best that we can with this project. So that's my recommendations. I'm not sure how my other fellow DRC committee members feel about it.
Let me come back if I might to the question of with regard to conflicts between who moves into this building and children living in the area. If you've got registered sex offenders, they would not be able to move into that building because children live next door. Is that would that be correct? Or be, within proximity?
I don't know that that's correct. I can't tell you that.
No, I would say it's not correct, and we'd have to double check, but that's an emergency housing area where at-risk children are being put. And so for that to be there and to function, that is my biggest concern. And I would like to hear from that neighbor if they really are in the 100 feet notification.
Yeah. Okay. And as far as I know, just there's no information here that someone might be housing a registered sex offender, but that is the demographic that is of greatest concern next to with having children. But I would think well, we would need to get clarity as the impact of that emergency care facility. And there are also plans for that emergency care facility further that they're developing. So if there's an impact, I don't know that you can dictate who moves in unless state law says, they have to do that. But as far as DRC doesn't have any say about who moves in, is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, that's.
We don't. I know. I wish we had that much control. No,
I mean,
I don't. I don't want that much control.
That argument is same everywhere. I mean, they were concerned about neighbors moving in here. Well, there's neighbors on the other side of the street. There's neighbors across the street. There's neighbors everywhere. There's no control at all. What might happen here can happen on the other side of the house. It's
right, and it is a zone for multifamily, so people have a right to build multifamily in that multifamily zone.
Yes, up to 11 units plus 1 density bonus unit plus 25% ADUs plus another detached ADU.
How many properties multifamily zoning have we actually see utilize the 11 units in that area?
The full density in this area, I would have to look by property and see.
Only because it seems like it's a small parcel for that.
Yeah, definitely the area has been zoned multifamily, at least since our general plan update in 2002. We've had quite a lot of infill development happening. The triangular parcel across the street that was developed as a small lot single family subdivision probably went in before the state required minimum density. But the state now requires that we at least build a certain number of units on our higher density multifamily properties.
Okay, it's hard because we're going through this, the general plan update as it's coming up, and you just have so many different things that are changing, the ADU requirements, the RENA numbers. We understand that he's trying to, build affordable housing for his employee workforce. Getting employees in general is a challenge. So I know that he's, got some limitations in what he's trying to do, and I'm not trying to make it more difficult. I'm just trying to make sure that to have the success in the neighborhood, and this being the first unit, this can set precedent. And I feel like this is something that we may need to just take a little bit of time to reevaluate his plans. They're still changing. We're submitted with a different set of plans, via email that we didn't have in our packets, and just take a little bit more time to review the information they've provided and get the feedback from the neighborhood. So. All right, Kelly, what do you need from us?
Some direction. If you're continuing to ask for some specific information, or I know the applicant was not available at this meeting, so his representative, if you're asking for feasibility of certain items and asking to continue, we can do that. What I did hear in terms of adding to conditions was the potential for the Valley Oak to be a box-sized tree or similar, the second story siding to wrap all sides, all elevations, and that vertical siding elements be incorporated with potentially like a compatible color so that there's some visual variation. Curbs at the parking spaces along the north property line or some sort of vehicle barrier. High windows in the laundry rooms, potentially eliminating the office completely in units 4 and 8 if they choose not to do a 2-bedroom unit, and moving the laundry room over. Not removing those 2 parking spaces so that we could either slide the building forward or accommodate the 2-bedroom units. Adding that the stucco be sand finish or hand trowel, darker earth tone colors, and gridded windows.
Okay. So
solid fencing.
Solid fencing.
And work with the neighbors on landscaping options with regard to particularly the neighbors to the south, where those are where it's not as clear from the landscaping plan that there necessarily are options. But as Dennis mentioned, maybe that you could do something on, make an agreement on the other side of the fence. Can we help this project be a good neighbor, given that it doesn't have a lot of constraint? You know, we can move a little bit, that helps a lot. If not, are there other ways it can do?
Okay, so you've received DRC feedback. So I guess the looming question is this: do we want to continue this and get more information, or do we want to put it forward?
I'll make a motion that we continue this to a date certain that Phil can provide us, or some possible date. And so we can learn more about what's happening with the structure and the options that we have discussed.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Yeah, I'll second that.
All right.
And then we'll need to announce that if we're doing a date certain, we'll need
Yeah.
to announce that date now and select that date.
I just wanted to interject, if we continue to a date certain, then there's no legal noticing requirement, but I heard some requests for a
That was
larger
the other,
noticing radius.
exactly, that was the other thing I wanted to mention. So our best bet is to give some confidence as to when this is going to come back, but also re-notice, because I think we heard a request to expand noticing. Was that in the motion?
Yes.
Okay, so a motion includes expanding notice to 1,000 feet. And we will try and get this back on the month of August, but we're not going to do a date certain because we're going to re-notify.
I would ask that the applicant be present, and maybe the staff can work with the applicant so that he can answer some of the questions that his consultant was unable to, because I know the consultant's still working with the applicant on some design issues.
And I would, I guess, add to that, I truly apologize to the applicant and their consultant, but I think all in all that as we talked about this, discuss it, that there will be a better project that will come out of it that everyone will be satisfied with at some point. And so I think that's good for everybody at this point in this line, in this project.
I agree. Annette, do you need to take a roll call?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Committee member Schmidt,
Yes.
Vice Chairperson Funk,
Yes.
Committee member Baranek, Committee member Baranek.
Yes.
Okay, I heard you.
Sorry.
It's okay. Committee member Vanden Eyck
No.
and Chairperson Newsom.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-1. Thank you.
Thank you. And we do appreciate the applicant presenting this, and I know how much time and effort you've put into it. And we look forward to seeing the next the revised and meeting with the applicant too. So thank you for your time. We appreciate it. And thank you to those of the public that came out and spoke on the item.
And make sure that the neighbors follow up and participate and are congenial as they go through this.
Thank you. Okay, on to the next item for review. Is that you, Kelly?
That will
That
be
is
Mariah.
me.
Mariah's going to do this one.
Hey, Mariah.
She's been waiting.
I know, so patiently. Finally, my turn. Okay. This is for a new recreational vehicle storage lot at 6805 Sycamore Road.
And before we launch into this, could we do like a 2-minute stretch break?
Sure.
Thanks.
We'll come back in 2 minutes. Everybody set your watch. You guys waiting on me? I hope not. Supposed to be at the fair judging 39 apple pies tonight. I don't think that's going to happen.
Too bad, you're gonna miss out.
Yeah. On a big bellyache. No, I'm kidding. Actually, apple pie is my favorite in the world.
And do we have, can I ask a clarifying question with regard to location of this project to make sure that I don't have a property within 500 feet of it?
Of which one?
The Sycamore.
Okay.
The one that's coming up.
Oh, yes.
Are any properties in the lakes within 500 feet of this property? I'm guessing not, but.
The lakes is always weird because it fits in the backside of the properties.
Mariah, do you want me to text you her address? Would that help? Or do you have?
Yeah, maybe. No, I can check the lakes, but maybe if you just send me her address, that will be a
Would
little.
it matter if there's common area?
No, it would just be from Susan's house.
Although she's owns common area.
Oh, good point.
Well, it would, unless we're really, really close, there's not that much common area. that is to the south of my house. I have one of the southernmost houses in the lakes. Although Councilmember Darrows has me beat.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does. It's always fun when we always have to go, okay, did everybody do the 500 radius? That's why I was having everybody clarify. Because it's amazing how many times you see a DRC and you're like, oh my gosh, this seems so close. What is it really if you walk it out?
Mm-hmm.
And Mariah has a really cool map of it.
I think you're totally fine, but I'm just double checking.
Right, just because it's a fairly broad project, and so you know where the edge of it is to where we are.
Mm-hmm.
I always think it'd be faster to, you know, just cut through the field over the railroad tracks, just be there in so much more time.
That's the grandma.
Well, I did try to walk out my back fence to go find the property and was not successful in figuring out exactly where it's going to be. So,
it always looks different on paper.
Yeah.
I don't realize that when we look at these maps, you know, we do drive by the locations to see them, to get perspective, because what you see on a piece of paper and, you know, logistically are two totally different things.
Yeah, I just double checked and you are way far enough away.
Okay. Thank you. Too bad. But, hey.
You don't get to set this one out.
You could have went 8 apple pie.
Yeah, you could have filled in.
Oh, I already did Good Morning Slow. Got up at 5:45 a.m. to do that. So, hey, you know.
All right, let's hear the next item, Mariah.
Let's see. Okay. This is my first using the online version, so sorry it looks a little messy, but okay, so this is a RV storage lot again at 6805 Sycamore Road. This is an image of the zoning map. The property that we're talking about is mostly in the industrial zone, but does have a little bit of space in the open space zone. That's because the Salinas River runs adjacent to this property, but the area that we're talking about for the actual RV storage yard is completely within the industrial zoned area. It's surrounded by the railroad to the south, more industrial property to the east. And then beyond that industrial property is a residential zone. The property itself is just a little bit over 23 acres, but the area that we're talking about for the RV storage is just about 6 acres for their lease area. So this gives you a little bit of an idea. Even that red area is not all of the space that's being used. You'll see in just a minute, but it gives you an idea of the actual property lines. There is an existing construction yard with some storage buildings on this property. The property itself is actually owned by Atascadero Mutual Water Company. So they're leasing it out, but they do have someone leasing the construction yard that you see there in blue, completely separate from the project that we're seeing today.
Hey, Mariah, could you put it, maybe try presentation mode to make it a little bigger?
Yeah, okay, let me
Sorry.
see. Yeah, no problem. It was kind of bothering me too, but I was just,
No, I do that sometimes too.
yeah, well, my PowerPoint wasn't working, so I was told to use the online version. Okay, I think this is going to be better.
Not a big deal if it doesn't work out, but we try.
Is that easier?
There we go.
Okay. Okay. So a little bit of background about this site itself. In 2007, the council adopted a specific plan development number 31 overlay zone for a proposed BMX facility at the time. This BMX facility was never constructed. It still has that overlay zone, but essentially, other than the BMX facility, it says any other uses that are conditionally allowed per our zoning code on this property are still just conditionally allowed. So it didn't really change anything in regards to this project. And again, the property is owned by Atascadero Mutual Water Company, and part of it's being leased out to a separate party. So the project that we're talking about today is a 2-phase RV storage lot that will eventually have up to 262 RV parking spaces. Phase 1 includes 138 spaces, and phase 2 will add 124 spaces. RV storage lots, as I previously mentioned, in the industrial zone are subject to conditional use permit approval. So this is coming before the design review committee for your input, and then we'll eventually move on to the planning commission for them to review. So I've just outlined the different areas in phases 1 and 2. So this, the yellow outline area you see there is phase 1, again, at 138 RV parking spaces. It includes a new perimeter fence around that entire site, as there's not, well, we'll talk about fencing in a little bit, but there's a lot of new perimeter fencing, site grading for the actual parking spaces, new gravel base, meeting our city engineering standards. They will be including a new entrance gate that will be basically code operated, so there won't be anyone actually working on the site. It will be totally self-service for people to come and go as long as they have that code. And then finally, they have to build the stormwater basin out within phase 1. One thing that is a little bit unique about the project, currently the De Anza Trail goes through this site. It kind of goes through the middle of the site. It's not a super official looking trail, but it's been used through the middle of the site. So with this project, the applicant is going to have to realign the De Anza Trail to the front of the property. So it's out of the way of the proposed development. And this is conditioned to be finished with phase 1. So this would be part of this phase. And then when they move on to phase 2, which is shown here in the blue, there would be an additional 124 parking spaces added. Between phase 1 and phase 2, they are going to add a chain link fence between those 2 phases. So that would obviously be removed with the completion of phase 2. And then they will be extending a new vinyl coated chain link fence, which is adjacent to the Salinas River, which again, we'll talk about the chain link fencing. Moving on to landscaping, the applicant did provide a landscape plan. It's a little bit hard to see, or it's probably almost impossible to see the species, but basically you'll see the trees throughout the site. There are 6 oak trees that are proposed to remain on site and be protected. And then there's a lot of native drought tolerant shrubbery, as well as new sycamore trees. And those are the these kind of trees that you see here. Those are all sycamore trees. So one thing that staff is adding as a condition is to sort of revise the landscape plan to focus taller shrubbery and trees along the fence adjacent to the project, between the fence and the De Anza Trail. And then really a lot lower shrubbery along the front here, along Sycamore Road. And that's really intended to avoid creating a hidden corridor. We don't want it to become an attractive nuisance or anything. So really, we just want the vegetation to act as screening between the trail and the RV storage, and then just finish off with some lower landscaping along the road just to complete the trail. So this is just a little bit of landscaping shown throughout the rest of the site. I think that if you read the notes from the property owner, there was some concern about planting throughout the site based on the viability of its survival because of the use and having to add irrigation and whatnot. So this was proposed, but staff is in support of removing landscaping throughout the actual RV storage lot just based on the use and again the viability of it actually surviving and then the industrial nature of the site. However, landscaping was not shown along the frontage between Sycamore Road and the existing construction lot. Even though the construction lot is not a part of this project, it's all one property, and this is probably the largest project that will happen on the site since it's taking up most of the usable space here. And so staff is requesting and would like feedback from the design review committee if they feel that additional landscaping should be included along Sycamore Road. And you'll see some pictures. There is sort of a bark mulch there right now, so it's not completely unfinished. But just to complete the project, staff is recommending that additional landscaping be added there. So the municipal code does require that 5% of the lot in industrial zones be landscaped. This hasn't been provided, the actual percentage of coverage of landscaping, but this will be verified prior to planning commission hearing. If this proposed landscape plan doesn't meet the 5% requirement, however, staff will support an exception due again to the industrial nature of the site, its location, and the use. So now moving on to fencing, which I alluded to a little bit before. It's a little bit hard to see the colors here, but you can see this yellow fence is what's existing today. This is existing just normal metal chain link fence along the eastern property line and that existing construction yard. Originally, the applicant was proposing to keep the existing chain link fence that was between what will be the De Anza Trail and Sycamore Road. And staff had recommended either making it a little bit higher quality fence than chain link or just removing it completely. After talking to our public works department, it sounds like there's some hesitancy of just completely removing a fence between a trail and the public right of way. So staff is recommending a new split rail fence to provide the security of the trail, but not add to any loss of kind of visibility and again, creating a hidden corridor. So the condition is essentially a new split rail fence with a maximum height of 4 feet. It's pretty broad as far as a metal or a wood fence. So that's something that staff is recommending. All the blue fencing that you see along the edge here, this would all be vinyl coated chain link fencing. Our code does require that all new vinyl coated chain link fencing be screened by evergreen vegetation. However, staff is in support of an exception, in particular along the Salinas River, because there's really just not a lot of opportunity to plant vegetation. Once you hit the fence, the topography significantly changes and it's a pretty big berm, and then you get to the Salinas River. So staff's recommending an exception to not require evergreen screening around that Salinas River fence. However, we would like to see the new chain link fence be vinyl coated with a dark neutral color, like a dark brown or a dark green. And again, staff is in support of the evergreen vegetation exception. So typically when we're talking about these RV storage yards, lighting and security are some of the biggest topics. So the applicant is proposing 7 new light poles proposed, and they're not proposed at a maximum height of 7 feet. They're proposed at a maximum height of 20 feet. That's a typo. However, staff is recommending to decrease the height to 16 feet to reduce light spilling onto adjacent parcels. It is industrial in nature, but there is a lot of wildlife because it's such an open area and it's adjacent to the Salinas River. So we would like to see light be reduced as much as possible while still providing the level of safety that's necessary. The applicant is proposing lights that basically stay dim until they sense motion and then they brighten to their fullest brightness. And so staff is very pleased with that proposal because the light will only be triggered when there's motion. And then the applicant has stated that they have in the past contracted with a local security company that has 24-hour coverage. So they'll be available on call when necessary. And this is just an image that shows you a little bit about the locations of those lights and security cameras throughout the site. The red circles are the individual light poles, and then the security cameras are going to be mounted on those individual light poles. So you can see there's kind of one in the front, on the side, in the rear along the Salinas, again along the Salinas, and then between the RV storage lot and that construction yard. So here are some photos from the site as it is today. The top one here is the location. It's a little bit hard to see because it's all just a chain link fence right now. But if you can see, there is sort of a gate there. That's going to be the location of the new automated gate when you come off of Sycamore Road. This is the gate for that existing construction yard. This is the view from Sycamore when you're looking toward the highway. So you can see it's a pretty flat site. You can see a little bit of that berm there, the existing chain link fence that we're recommending be replaced with that lower split rail. This is again looking at the site toward the highway. And then this is looking toward the site in the opposite direction, sort of where this fence is, you see right here. This is around probably the area of the end of between phases 1 and 2. So this would be removed and then the rest of the site would be developed with phase 2. This is an image of that existing construction yard. Again, you can see there is some bark along the front here, so it's not just completely dirt, but staff is recommending that this be vegetated since this area is still a part of the same property. And then this area is the beginning of the De Anza Trail. There's a little parking area here, and then this, I'm not sure the proper name, but these measures to stop, motorcyclists or those kind of uses, this would actually be relocated toward the back of the property. So this would move back and this would just be open trail until you reach this further back here. So in the past, we've shown the design review committee sort of some proposed planning commission conditions. These are by no means final, but they sometimes provide a little bit of a sense of security that we are thinking about things as far as actual security on the site and how to make sure that it's maintained throughout the years. So we want to see that all landscaping and fencing site improvements be maintained in good order. No changes to those things can happen without city approval. We don't want cargo containers, inoperable vehicles or boats or inoperable RVs to be stored on the site, just registered and operable RVs. No storage of vehicles in any location other than those designated. No other land uses can be allowed without specifically being approved by the city. No RV washing, no dumping of RV waste. We have a setback from, I think the staff report said Atascadero Creek, but obviously this is the Salinas River, so that was corrected. we want to see that realignment of De Anza Trail be consistent with what is proposed. I know the applicant in that letter did have some concern that the wording says the trail shall be completed and fully landscaped to the satisfaction of the community development director. Typically, we have that condition to allow for actually a little bit of flexibility, but I'm happy to reword that to say shall be completed per approved plans. And then if any modifications are needed, they'd be done to the satisfaction of the community development director. So I just wanted to address that. We talk about that fencing along the front, the vegetation, and being taller, being focused along the De Anza Trail. We're conditioning that all new chain link fencing be vinyl coated. The maximum height of those light poles be 16 feet. And then this use permit can be subject to additional review if there's any operational complaints, and it might have to have some added mitigation measures if there's recurring issues. So that was kind of a lot to go through, but some of the discussion items that we particularly want to discuss with the design review committee are, first of all, the landscaping and whether the design review committee is in support of granting an exception to the requirement that at least 5% of the site be landscaped. And then if we want to see any landscaping within the actual RV storage area. And then also we'd like the design review committee's feedback on landscaping in front of the construction yard along Sycamore Road. And then I think the big topic of the fencing, lighting, and security is what type of fencing you'd like to see along Sycamore Road. And finally, if you want to talk about any of those proposed project conditions or you see any that should be added, again, those are not finalized. It's just a kind of an outline, an idea of what comes along with approving if this project is approved with the conditions of approval. And with that, staff is available for questions.
Thank you, Mariah. All right, let's go through our list. Any questions? Dennis, I saw your hand pop up first.
Yeah, I can. What's happening with the parking at De Anza right now at the one gate?
What's happening right now, or what's
No,
proposed?
what's happening with the parking that exists there now? That is it going to stay there, or is it going to be moved, or will be eliminated, or what's happening with the De Anza parking at that point?
Yes, that's a good question. The parking lot is just proposed to stay the same as it is today.
I'll note that De Anza is also access down the road towards where the corporate yard for water company is. There's a lateral access there. Is there going to be any provisions for off-street parking at that location?
No,
That's outside the scope of this project. This project is only going to be responsible for making improvements on the property that it's on.
And that's where that trail is that not the water company property?
That's the water company property, but it's outside the scope of this lease. They're
okay.
leasing this property from the water company, and they're not leasing the other portion that has that other access to it. Now, you could talk to the water company if there's a representative here today. I think John Neal's going to be here today about that improvement separate from this project. Or you could, you have to find a nexus between this project and doing that kind of improvement to require a condition on it. So
okay,
that's the discussion.
Is there sycamore trees along the road because it's Sycamore Road? Is that the concept?
Sycamore trees it's a popular street tree, but yeah, I think it does make sense.
Are there linear offsets from the De Anza trail? Is it specified it's 20 feet wide, or is there anything that says this is what the De Anza Trail is.
Oh,
So-
is there- yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think we have super specific details at this point. I believe the trail is shown to be, I think 20 feet wide. And we do have specific trail standards that it will need to meet. But we don't have a super specific plan at this time.
Well, I note that because there are a lot of people who are remote control enthusiasts who use that area to fly their planes and drive their vehicles. Are they still going to be allowed to do that, or because of the RV parking, they're not going to be able to fly their planes over top of it?
So that'll be a good question for the applicant team and for the water company. But yeah, this has been used as a de facto airport for some time. And I'm not sure in what respect that could continue or be relocated.
Yeah, and I will just remind you that this is a fairly small portion of the overall site. So there is still quite a bit of space when you move beyond toward the highway. So there may still be space, but not on this property.
Curb and gutter along Sycamore Road?
They'll have to complete the frontage improvements. I don't think we have specifics at this time, but yeah, the whole entrance even into the RV parking lot is it's kind of rough at this point. So
Most likely that'll be DJ because GG because it's less than
oh yeah,
12% slope or 11% slope. A little kind of surprised about Public Works discussion about the chain link fence along Sycamore Road. Who maintains that fence at this time?
so I believe that would be the water company.
So it's privately maintained at this time, not by the city.
Yeah, and John Neal could probably confirm more.
Because there was a comment also by the applicant about split rail fence and the idea of having to constantly repair it in the area. And then again, because of the separation, the comment that you made about Public Works, I ride my bike. We have a new trail along Morrow Road that's separated by a parking spot, a linear parking spot from the roadway. And I don't see how that's any more dangerous than not having a fence along Sycamore Road between Sycamore Road and the De Anza Trail.
Well, it was brought to our attention, it's just the distance, it's much closer and it's at grade with the trail. On Morrow Road, you're at a much different grade from the highway and you're
No,
about
you're not.
55.
You're right at the same grade, believe me.
You're about 55 feet away. So it's a good point.
10
but
feet away.
Yeah, that's a comment that's given to us from our Public Works division. If it's maintenance that's a concern, there are different designs that can last forever, like steel pipe, oil pipe fencing has been a really popular use in those situations where it doesn't become visually intrusive, but it becomes very protective.
And I mean, I don't mind the lighting as it's been proposed, but as you had mentioned, it's a wildlife corridor, so there's a lot of movement. So those lights are going to be going on and off and on and off and on and off constantly if they're being activated by motion.
Yeah.
I agree with the landscaping requirements along the not landscaping requirement along the Salinas corridor. I believe that will automatically landscape itself with riparian plants along the time. I also agree with the non-landscaping areas throughout the project because extending irrigation all over the place doesn't seem a good wise use of money. I think if we kind of focus at the entrance, that'd be fine. Other than that, we'll listen to other comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions, Jeff?
No, actually, I don't have any questions.
Emily?
No, none at this time.
Susan?
Yes, I wanted to get clarification on what is on the surrounding properties. So if you look at this here right now, what's across the road from Sycamore?
That would be the railroad and then the
Okay.
cemetery.
Grass ground.
Okay. And while you got it on, and then on the at the bottom right of this picture, then it does, the property itself abuts a residential area.
This is this is actually still the industrial zone. These are some industrial buildings, and then these properties are residential.
Okay, so it's industrial abutting industrial. And to the north, it abuts open space, or currently open space zone industrial going up to the highway. Is that correct?
Yes, this would be industrial with probably a little open space here.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Good enough. So there's nothing built up on anything around here. Can you show us where the trail is going to go as a through line? Not just the at the edge of this property, but can.
So this image, are you asking about this direction?
That's the trail.
So yeah,
Yeah,
this kind of shows the existing trail. You can see it sort of going toward the middle of the property. So this will be realigned to just kind of go along here. And then it extends up and keeps going.
Okay, so it'll move sort of to the front of the property, but keep going.
Yes.
And does it go in the other direction also? Or this is this is
It
the
tapers
trail.
out right on this property, and then actually on the regional maps, it joins the street and then joins back up with the river further south down by the wastewater treatment plant. And it's because the Salinas River just south of this property becomes really kind of narrow and a little more channelized with steep sides, and there's no space for the trail. So there's not, yeah, the regional maps show it going out to the street at this point.
Okay. Well, you want to maintain continuity in a trail like that, but the river is going to be where it is. Vertically, is this up on the bluff or is this down in the floodplain?
This is down below, so you can see it has a pretty dramatic step here in the back before you get to the Salinas, but this area sits at grade with the road.
Yeah, okay.
I don't think it's considered part of the lower floodplain. There's a flat area, there's a berm, and then it really drops into the river. So I'm not sure if that clarifies it. It's not in the actual river floodplain. It's higher than that, but it's not
Okay.
on that plateau that's that buffer between the river and this site.
Okay, thank you. That was helpful. Are they going to use permeable paving or some way to manage the runoff from the site? Or are they not paving the site? They're doing DG or something else?
Yeah, so there's no pavement. It's just going to be a class 2 base, a DG base. And they did work with Lori in our public works department on how to meet the requirements in their stormwater basin and everything.
Okay, didn't want to create erosion of that bank on the Salinas. Okay, I'm good.
I have to always find my mute button. Okay. I don't have anything at this time, so I'm going to go ahead and open it up to the applicant.
Okay, and I think Don McAdam, I don't know if you're calling on your cell phone, but if you are, if you want to just raise your hand, you press *9. Not sure.
Looks like we have 3 attendees, 1 by phone. Can't tell. There we go.
Here's John. All right, you just have to unmute. There we go.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, this is John Neal. I'll answer any questions. I'm not the applicant. You did bring up some points. Some of the comments that we made were from the water company. We got a couple concerns along Sycamore Road. They're going to move that fence back in, the existing chain link fence 50 feet into the property. We were concerned that there would be, that would induce homeless parking along Sycamore Road. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hello? And so we requested that the double fence be put in there. It was also our comment that a split rail fence would be a maintenance nightmare. It won't be for us during the length of the lease because that'll be responsible of the leasee, but I don't want to inherit a maintenance responsibility in the future. I also want to be a little cautious on how much planting we do in there. I don't want to create, for lack of a better term, a homeless habitat. We struggle with it down there enough as it is. And if we get too much tree cover, et cetera, we could end up with a situation like you have at the Highway 41 off ramp. So I want to make sure we build in a little bit of flexibility with that. What else did I? That's primarily it. The site itself is currently what they call red rock. So it's a fairly impervious. Putting class 2 base on top of it's not going to change the drainage characteristics to any appreciable amounts. And then that bank that you referenced is actually a levee that was built by the Corps of Engineers back in 1969. So the site itself is within the 100-year limits of inundation, but it's in what is essentially a backwater. There's not a lot of depth to it. And you're also talking about vehicles that could be moved out of there if need be. And I'll be happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you. All right,
I'll go. Comment. There was a comment made about RC vehicles and airplanes. Actually, water company policy prohibits motorized vehicles on the property. So technically that's not an allowable use. I just thought I'd bring that up for you.
How do you drive on it?
Oh, we go down there with our shotguns on the weekends.
Shotguns.
All right.
I don't know if you can hear me.
I can.
This is Don McAdam. I had to back up and replay where it says *6, so I'm unmuted. I represent the applicant, VSM Leasing, and John Neal addressed a few of the questions he had sent in writing, I believe. I don't know if Annette copied those out to everyone. The very first one he had up in landscaping on the page 4 of the handout addresses the taller vegetation, possibly giving shade and inviting more encampments, and preferring not to do that and encourage those things. Is it possible to go with the same size landscaping from Sycamore Street back to the front fence of the storage yard?
So you're talking about heading north from the proposed lease site?
No, well, I'm not sure which way north is. There's no arrow on the site, but perpendicular to Sycamore, from Sycamore back into the area that we're going to be leasing.
Same height.
Along the De Anza Trail, but between the De Anza Trail and the front fence of the storage yard, proposed was taller landscaping along the fence and shorter landscaping on the roadside. And what I gathered from your comment in red in the box there was not putting taller landscaping so we don't give them shade and a place to, I guess, pitch tents.
Well, like I said, my comment was sort of general. I just don't want to create a habitat that's going to encourage that behavior. I think as long as the DRC is flexible in our design with that, that's something, you know, you and I can work on.
Okay. That works. But I want to make sure the DRC is on board with what's being discussed, that, yeah, that's, they understand that the goal is not to increase encampment. I heard a whole bunch about that from the previous applicant.
Yeah, and we struggle with it a lot down there.
Sure. Yeah, it's an ideal location, I suppose. And then the comment you made about the split rail fence being a maintenance nightmare is, I don't know who the people were who spoke ahead of us. Somebody had mentioned steel pipe fence, or I guess as a low rail. Is there a need for a fence other than decorative purposes?
Yeah, it's there is a couple of problems there. One is the vehicle speed, the traffic speed along there is a concern with the walking trail. The second is we do have a parking problem out there with overnight parking. People pull off the roadway wherever they can to spend the night out there, to camp. That has been an ongoing issue right at that spot. So if there's some railing or fencing, once we move that other fence back, you're going to open that territory up to activities occurring. But at the same time, you want to keep it very transparent and visible so you can see what's going on. So that's where staff's idea came up with a split rail, because it's affordable. If you want to go less maintenance, a welded steel pipe fence, oil pipe fence, low 3 foot, 4 foot is also fairly affordable and could be installed along an area to solve that same issue, keeping the visibility, but precluding the camping and parking and vehicle intrusion.
Yeah, and Phil, that's a good idea, the welded pipe fence.
I agree. Then again, I'm starting out because John, you represent the Mutual Water Company. I'm starting out with the notes you had sent in, and then there's some that are from my client, the lessee or leasee. So the first two John had were about the height of the landscaping, then the fence. You posed a question about no work on the site being within 10 feet of the top of the bank. Yeah, it says Atascadero Creek, but it's the Salinas. I think that is correct. I think we are staying back 10 feet from the top of the bank.
Oh yeah, that was a mistake. That was just an error in the staff report.
The Salinas versus Atascadero Creek, yeah, but
Yes.
the 10 feet back, that is the standard, correct? 10 feet.
I thought it said 30 feet, but regardless, you're meeting the standards. Yeah, it's 30 feet here, but
Okay.
we just want to
okay.
make sure that's a condition moving forward.
Okay, and then another comment from John in the red box was regarding a satisfaction of the community development director. It says this should be per permit conditions, not a subject review by an individual.
Well, you don't know how capricious Phil can be, so we need to be cautious with him.
Now be nice.
Yeah, so Dawn, we'll go ahead and reword that when we move on to planning commission, and it can say per approved plans, and then if anything varies from those plans, it will be at Phil's discretion.
Okay.
Okay, and then the comments John had, the last one kind of circles back down there on number 11, back to the taller vegetation. So again, it sounds like you guys have got a plan to address that and maybe not provide a lot of shade. I think that's probably handled. The comments from VSM, my client, the first one he had sent in, and I know he emailed it in a couple of days ago. I don't know if it made it in the notes, but he had a question about landscaping the adjacent property, which I think he's referring to between the street and the construction yard that's there.
Mm-hmm.
I've walked that area, and I don't know if the city uses that as a dumping place for their chipping when they have to take out a tree, but that's not just a small layer of bark. It's at least a foot deep, if not maybe 2. When you walk on it, it's really spongy. And so if you want landscaping there, there's going to have to be a plan to remove all that bark because there's a bunch. It's not like a 6-inch layer on the ground. It looks like it gets more dumped on it as needed when they have something that's been chipped up. It looks like that's where they go and place it along the road. And I didn't know if that had, you know, been addressed or come up in any conversations on the city end, but it's not merely decorative bark. It's kind of appears to be a dumping ground for chipping.
Yeah, this is John again. I think that was from the previous leasee of that property, Dave Vermina. He had some chipping going on there, and I think that's just where he placed the chips.
Okay. Well, if it is going to need to be landscaped, and the reason my client brings that up is he says, well, that's kind of between the building and the structures and what are there. He said everything that he has is behind a couple of fences and the buildings, so it's not really visible from the road. I get that, you know, since we're doing an improvement, it's kind of maybe on us to make it look nice from the street. But if we're going to be landscaping, there's got to be a provision to remove all that art first, I think.
Yeah, so I think we want the DRC to weigh in on that if they want to see more landscaping there or if they're fine with leaving it as is. But yeah, I think we want to hear some feedback.
Okay, and then you guys had already addressed his other, I'm sorry, his second question, because we've got a pretty long length of existing galvanized fence along Sycamore Road that's going to be taken out and replaced, is it possible to repurpose it, move it to the back where the toe of the bank is from that levee, put the existing galvanized fence back there? We could still put the privacy slats in, but, you know, rather than tear all that out, haul it to a landfill and add to, you know, dumping, can we repurpose it to the back of the property where the visibility is not as much of a factor? We're trying to clean up the street side, but make use of the fence at the back of the property.
So I think if you just want to go through your questions, Dawn, and then I believe the DRC will sort of discuss them all.
Okay. Okay. The next question, that's the one that I think has already been addressed. It sounded like there was a consensus of, yeah, we probably don't need to landscape the interior storage area. And his fourth one I figured was kind of a reach, but he said, for security, can we use barbed wire like the existing fence along the front of the property, again, to deter people and to increase security? But I realize that's probably not, you know, warm and fuzzy and public friendly kind of stuff, but had to ask. The only other comment I would make regarding the client that I'm working for is besides his request, I can see a need to minimize landscaping just because, you know, we're in a pretty bad drought. We don't know when, you know, it's going to get better. And so why put in more stuff that needs to be watered if we don't absolutely have to? And, you know, try to conserve our resources. That's kind of his same thinking with the fence. You know, gosh, why tear out a bunch of fence and haul it away and pay to dump it when, you know, it could be erected at the back of the property and not be a visual impact. So try to recycle where we can and be thrifty with the water, but that's the majority of the comments there.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to public comment. If there's anybody here in the webinar or on the phone that wants to speak at public comment, please raise your hand. We see one other person on here. Okay, looks like nobody else is wanting to speak. I can bring it back to DRC for discussion. Jeff.
I don't have any additional comments. I think all of the staff's recommendations are good, and I would go those.
Okay, Emily?
I feel similarly. I agree with all the staff recommendations. I think in exchange for agreeing that interior landscape does need to be installed, that landscaping along frontage should be extended past the old Romina site.
Okay, Susan?
I'd concur in that. I want to make sure that the trail remains suitable for equestrian use. I assume that it does. There's quite a bit of horse use in this, and at least a little bit further north, there is quite a bit. So is there going to be any problem with equestrian use?
I don't foresee any. I believe our trail standards meet the needs of equestrian use, but I'll double check on that before planning.
Okay. And I know that John, in following that question, has put his hand up, so maybe that be there. But assuming that there's no equestrian problem, I am comfortable with the staff recommendations, and I think we can. You know, it's an industrial site. I would also, I'm not a fan of old dumpy fencing, but I can see the point facing out onto the Salinas in an area that won't be, you know, hugely not a sort of gateway visibility as far as I can tell. But I can deal with them moving the fencing around and using the old stuff on the Salinas.
Dennis?
Yeah, I just want to note this is far from a gateway area. People drive up and down that street like 50, 60 miles an hour and don't care what's going on. Just want to clarify, please. John Neal was speaking about more of an evening or more of a balance of landscape between Sycamore Road and the new fence that's going to be providing protection to the RV yard. Is that a staff recommendation or not?
So I think we're definitely open to working with the applicant to take their concerns into consideration while also trying to make the trail look as nice as possible. So I don't think we have a solid answer, but I think we can work together to sort of figure out what species should go where.
Yeah, the intent is not to create, obviously hiding areas. The intent is to basically have a good buffer of some broken up visual corridor in there with an RV park, or not an RV park, but RV storage being added. And the idea is that the front of that site becomes a higher quality appearance than it even is today through the use of some fencing, through the use of some of the landscape. But we're very flexible on that. We obviously don't want to create a lush situation in there where you can hide within landscape or there's shade or encampment areas. So we're very aware of those things. We actually work with these projects through our police department, really to be proactive in that kind of arena to design those kinds of features.
So less trees and more brush.
Well, sometimes what we do is low ground cover and then thin trees that are deciduous, so you don't create that habitat, or you do shrubs that are smaller, narrower, and end at the 6 feet height, and you have sporadic trees every 40 feet or so.
Or you end up doing what Caltrans is doing, which is raising the tree line along the freeway.
Yeah, that's typically that works. And then
okay, I just want to make sure, because the applicant wanted to make sure that there was an understanding that the planning committee, that the DRC understood that there might be some variation in the landscaping. I agree with the repurposing of the fence. It's a wise use versus trashing the old fence. They're going to put new covering on it. The pipe fencing, is that also a recommendation of staff?
that's at the discretion of the DRC. That's an idea that popped up when the maintenance question came up, and that's a durable solution. So
Okay. I just want the other members to know that pipe fencing is not then the recommendation of staff, and it's something that if we support, we have to endorse. There was a comment, I believe, about there was kind of white vinyl fencing, or something that the covering that goes on top of the chain link. was there not a request that that be changed to more of a neutered color of some type?
Well, our code requires a vinyl coated fencing for these new projects in this industrial zone.
But not
As an
white.
option, we've allowed metal picket. Metal picket is a much nicer way to go. But typically the idea is that a storage yard is screened from the right of way and screened from active adjacent properties. It's not such a big deal when you've got a berm and a river in the back, so that's more flexible.
I understand that, but it can be green, can be brown, doesn't have to be white, correct?
No, it's supposed to be, yeah, a dark neutral color. We don't want to see it be white.
Okay, good. So those items, I'm wondering, again, I'm asking very specifically because each of the other members said that they agreed with the recommendations of staff. Not all those areas were, well, most specifically pipe fencing wasn't a recommendation.
Correct. So yeah, if you just say you agree, that
Repurposing of the
means
fence wasn't a recommendation. I would suggest that, John Neal had talked about the discretion of the planning director. I believe that it'd be more flexible in the applicant's favor if you kept the discretion of the planning director involved in this to make these minor tweaks. So those are my observations.
And I haven't heard anyone address the applicant's request for the barbed wire fencing or the barbed wire above the fencing.
The razor.
well, it's just barbed wire angle. Razor wire is the circular Constantine wire. We typically don't like to see that, but I think they're requesting what's on that fence now, which is the barbed wire. That is something we do like the DRC to weigh in on. That is a significant issue aesthetically. It's there right now in the front. That, this is going to be storage of boats and RVs, and that is, an area that doesn't have a lot of eyes on it. So it is a concern, but it's also an aesthetic.
And this fencing would be along the protective corridor around the RV parking and not along the pipe fencing along or whatever
No,
fencing along.
not along the trail, between the trail and the road.
Okay.
But between the trail and the project area, the storage area.
I think
What
it
we're
would-
talking about, and at the rear of the site as well. So
I think it'd be appropriate around the RV parking area.
I think as a security, I agree. I think it's probably needed. It's not aesthetically beautiful, but I think
You're not gonna
security
see it.
purpose.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. It is an industrial site and care needs to be taken to keep people from climbing over and making a home there. So I'm good with that, and I'm good with the pipe fence. That seemed like a good compromise.
Agree. Right. Staff looking for any more direction from us?
No, I believe we have all we need here. Thank you.
All right, thank you to the applicant for coming and speaking, and look forward to seeing your project at going on to the planning commission. So thank you. All right, now we'll go on to committee member comments and reports. What do we have?
I wanted to maybe make a comment. I don't have the paperwork in front of me right now, but I do know that the SB 9 ordinance is coming forward, and I want to just talk about the comments that have been made by the department on the purpose of the ordinance. And they have mentioned more than once affordability, and that's why we have smaller buildings attached to, or at least have been proposed to be attached to that. I have a position paper from the state, and believe me, I'm not a fan of the state. However, that position paper does not mention once within that whole article about affordability of housing at all. What they do talk about is that the SB 9 is providing an opportunity for people to improve themselves financially by implementing SB 9 and their benefit to that. And that's where they see the purpose is. And so there's no discussion at all about having smaller housing to be affordable in their position paper. And so I just want to note that, please.
Housing is so outrageous right now. I don't know how we see that changing, and as the cost of materials continues to go up, the cost of fuel and trucking and, you know, finding qualified labor just in itself. I mean, there's just so many limitations that we have on our day-to-day lives. Housing is just a whole nother story.
And that's agreeable. And then that would be a decision that the developer is going to make. I'm going to build a big house because I can afford the materials, or because the materials are so expensive, I'm not going to build a big house. But to have it regulated and say that you can't build a house that's greater than 800 square feet on an SB 9 lot, that's a different discussion than what material costs are in terms of affordability. And again, my only real point is that the discussion that I have heard more than once is that this is intended to be a create affordability of we want smaller homes to make it affordable. And that is not what this thing is about. I'm reading the position, I'm looking at the position paper right now, and I wish I could find a particular section. Oh, the legislation will enable homeowners to create intergenerational wealth, and provide access to more rental and ownership options for working families who would otherwise be priced out of neighborhoods. So
that's affordability right there.
Yeah. But it also provides, it enables homeowners to create intergenerational wealth and provide access to more rental and ownership options. And that's repeated a lot. And so again, we're saying we can't have a house bigger than a certain size to make it affordable. What the chair mentioned is that the price of materials are skyrocketed. Again, if I'm developing something, I'm going to take that under consideration as to how big of a home or what I'm going to build. Versus I can only build it this big because the law that we've adopted within our community says I can't go above this size. So anyway, I just want to make that known. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. All right, on to director's report.
Well, on that note, we are moving forward with an accessory dwelling unit ordinance and a Senate Bill 9 ordinance. There's multiple resolutions, a huge amount of proposed text amendments to our zoning code and to our subdivision regulations. That is going to the Planning Commission this coming Tuesday. We'll have drafts of that available tomorrow morning. It was supposed to go out today, but we ran out of time because of this hearing. So we'll get that out and published. And when I speak about affordability, I think when I have discussed that many times, primarily that's targeted at accessory dwelling units. And that's because the state allows us to use accessory dwelling units to count towards our regional housing needs, our affordable housing units. And they allow us to count half of them as moderately affordable units and the other half as low income affordable units. So if we didn't have size limitations on them, we wouldn't be able to qualify those units for affordable housing. The true intent of state accessory dwelling unit law is to create a form of affordable housing. Senate Bill 9 is a little bit different. It is a duplex law. It enables people to essentially subdivide any single family residential lot that's in the urbanized zone into these 2 equal size lots, as long as they can meet the subject criteria. But the state does allow us to limit the size of the new houses that go on those sites. And they essentially allow one single family site to have 4 residences on it if you count the existing house that might be there, which we call a principal house. And then an SB9 unit, which they would call another primary house that could go on the other lot. Then each of those would be entitled to have accessory units as well. So you're talking about 4 units total. But if we were not to limit the size of an SB9 unit or an accessory unit, then we would have substantial, you're talking about then taking a normal single family lot where we intended one house to be with our general plan. And you're really going to start getting into some substantial neighborhood impacts with overlook, traffic, all these other things. But in addition to that, we would lose our ability to justify to the state that we're using these units as affordable housing. And then they would increase our affordable housing counts elsewhere in the community, which would have other impacts to it. So it may not be perfectly clear when you read the intent of the laws, but the overarching intent of both of these is to create more housing opportunities and more affordable housing opportunities. When the city council reviewed these, they did ask us to look at potentially 1,000 square foot limit. And they did ask us to look at having a way to get larger units on larger lots where it's more appropriate, where they can accommodate that without the impacts to the neighborhood. So that's all coming forward. That's big news. It will work its way from the planning commission and ultimately to the city council. But really what we're doing is we're just taking the state policies and state code and putting it into our zoning ordinance. We can't change much of it. We can limit size, we can put some objective design standards in there, and we can publish criteria about health and safety. And when it comes to our community, a lot of our properties are on septic. That's an issue. And a lot of our properties are in a very significant wildfire hazard zone. That's an issue because they've got limited access. So we have to call those issues out and make sure we don't develop high concentrations of housing where we can't properly serve the properties or we can't properly evacuate in an emergency. So we have to do that. We also have to protect the environment and historic resources. So those are the topic areas where we can play with it a little bit. But other than that, the state has, enabled these SB9 lot splits and the urban dwelling units and the accessory units. We're seeing quite a few applications for accessory units, not seeing any for the urban dwelling units, but we are seeing a couple of the urban lot split requests. So we'll start to see some of that.
What's going to happen is that people are going to, and I haven't read the ADU information at all, but it's going to kind of backdoor things where people are going to build the ADU first, build the 1,200 square feet, if that's the maximum allowable for the piece of property, and then do the SB9 post permitting of the ADU. That way they will get at least 1,200 square feet for that other lot. In terms of septic systems, obviously we have a lamp, and the lamp says you need these requirements to be able to have a septic system on the lot. Our regional water plan says you need 2 acres to have or at least an acre to have a septic system. So for you to do an SB9, now you need 2 acres, for one for each home. So there are controls that are within it automatically. SB9 is not going to be a rampant thing that people are going to go crazy on. It's very, very limited. How many homes are built right in the center of a lot? And so you can't get behind it because there isn't a wide enough access to the side of your lot. So it's very, very limited. When I drive around, I look and I see mostly corner lots being the ones that would probably qualify the best for SB9 because they're a corner lot and they have access on 2 frontages. And so it makes it easier. And so anyhow, hopefully I'll be able to participate.
Thank you. Thank you, Phil. All right. I think this is the point where we call this meeting adjourned.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Have a good night.
Thank
Bye.
you. In there. Have a great night.
You too. Bye.
Bye.